Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Talking TV with my mum, the weekly Geek-Dom review Roundup podcast where we discuss various genre/geeky TV shows and we give an review of them, and also our personal take on bits and pieces within those episodes. So we're over the 25 episode benchmark and we're on our way now, marching towards the next one. So this is episode 26 and we're recording this on Friday the 13th. So fingers crossed everything goes according to plan. So thank you very much for joining us again, and just the usual bit of housekeeping at the top of the show. So please click that thumbs up button and leave us a like. We really appreciate that, knowing that you enjoy what we're doing. And also leave your comments. We love your comments, and you could become a part of the show if you leave good enough comments and questions and feedback and your opinions on things we discuss, then we'll talk about them. Also, if you are new here, then please consider subscribing to the channel. It'd be fantastic to have you grow this geekdom of ours, this kingdom of geeks. We're growing nicely, so the more the merrier. And if you are already subscribed, then thank you very much for returning. Check out the description box for the timestamps for all of the things that we're talking about today, so that you can jump around should you need to. Obviously, we want you to listen to the whole thing, but that's there for ease of access. And also in the description box, you'll find the link to my Twitter, so you can come and follow me on there, and also my donation medium. So if you feel like supporting the podcast in any way or supporting the channel in general, then you've got two options there to do so. And I would be extremely grateful for any sort of patronage, but you're not under any obligation to do so. I don't content lock anything, so don't need to worry about that. But yeah, it'd be nice if you could. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce my co-host. So hello there, Mum. How are you?
Hello. Yes, hello. I'm good, thank you.
Good. Glad to hear that. So how are you feeling about last week's episode?
Oh, it's brilliant. I kind of listened to it for over and over again.
Yeah, definitely a good listen, wasn't it?
Oh, what a great guest. Oh, my days.
Yeah, he was a very good guest.
Hilarious.
Yeah, and I've had lots of positive feedback in relation to Skippy being on the show.
We've had a lot of views as well, so we did say it would go through the roof.
Yeah, it's been good. Yeah, there's been a good amount of views coming in. And don't forget, people, if you're here and this is like your first time here, or maybe you missed the last one or something, even though the reviews might date, the things like that, that was an interview with Skippy where we got to know him a bit better and stuff. Go back and listen to it. I mean, it's a very good listen. He's a very very fun, very humorous guest, and that that sort of hour that we spent with him was very, very fun, wasn't it?
Oh, it was epic. It's brilliant.
And obviously off the back of that, there's been some interest of other people that might like to come on in the future as guests, so we will have to look about scheduling some other people going forward, so that'll be quite good fun. Now that we know that we can do it. Right, okay, well, we won't dilly-dally. We will get on, and the first thing we're going to do is just going to go over the comments. So as I mentioned, we go back over your comments and give you guys a mention. So the first one we got was from Big Retro Show, returning again, and he says, "Whoa, this is awesome. I won't ruin the special guest for those who haven't listened, but they do not disappoint. Love the banter between you all." He then went on to say, "Your mum had me lolling when she said, 'No, I created a monster.' Haha." Pretty cool way to engage with your audience, Dom. It's awesome that you read and react to the comments. Well done. So, yeah. So he was a big fan of that. And he also said, not on the comment section, I think it was on Twitter, that he had listened to it with his wife, and his wife really enjoyed it as well. So that was cool. So thank you very much for that, man.
Yeah, cool.
So my buddy Jesse, who goes by Your Local Anti-Hero, he left several comments. So in relation to Skippy saying about Skippy by the barrelful, he said, "We all want Skippy by the barrelful." And he also said, "You guys crack me up. What a beautiful bearded man." And he also said, "I love your mum's commentary so much."
Oh, thank you, Jesse.
He also said, "This is so wonderful, man. You got to find a way to get this on iTunes so I can download it, man. I always love listening to your podcasts." And he did actually clarify to me. He said, "I know I don't often comment." And he said, "But I have been listening to your podcast for a while. I tend to listen to them in the car when I'm commuting to and from work. And because of that, obviously, I don't stop to write a comment or anything."
Oh,
But
that's good to know then. Yeah.
he actually listened to this, I think, at home this time, and that's why he left some comments. So thank you very much for that. And he did actually, again, so he's somebody that might be interested in being on the show, because on Twitter, he was like, "So what does somebody need to do to get on this podcast? Anybody want to invite me onto their podcast?" and all of this stuff. So he may be up for it if we can organize it at some point to perhaps have him on the show, because again, he's another big geek and stuff. So
Yeah,
it'd be
that'd
quite
be good.
cool to have him on. Then my buddy Nathan, erratic Ermine. This is a controversial one though, Mum. So to start with, he said he had a reaction to me saying that I liked The Last Jedi after the conversation that me and Skippy had about it last week. Now, we've gone on to have further conversations separate from the comment section on YouTube about this, and we discussed it a little bit, and we're going to discuss it a little bit more in the future, so I'm not going to dwell on that point. He did say he appreciated the points that me and Skippy made, though, and he said he'd love to discuss the movie more with us. And for the record, I'm down for hashtag Team Dom. No offense,
Boo!
hashtag Geek Mom.
Boo!
Yeah, but
I can't have everybody, can I? You've got to have at least one person behind
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Everybody so far is jumping on the mom train. So I'll tell you what, funny little aside. I was saying the other day, we've mentioned obviously about the potential of merch coming in the future. And
yes.
I was saying about how I'm getting really concerned now about how this whole mom thing is getting out of control. And I said, I can just see it now. If I launch a Geek Mom t-shirt, it's probably going to go on to outsell anything else that's got any of my stuff on it. It'd be typical. It'd be the top seller, wouldn't it? It'd be Geek Mom.
Well, I did change my Facebook picture to a Geek Mom and had a comment said this would look good on a t-shirt.
Yeah, wow. Watch this space, people. Watch this space. And obviously talking about watch this space, referring back to Jesse's comments, obviously we've mentioned before about trying to get this on a podcast medium, and I am still looking into that, and hopefully I will get that sorted at some point, not too far in the future.
Yes. Then
we had somebody that I've had interaction with and stuff for a little while, but first time she sort of found the podcast, which is Queen, I'm not going to say this correctly now, so apologies, Zonia. She normally just goes by Zoe on Twitter, and she said, so she hadn't subscribed to the channel before, and she subscribed off the back of the podcast. She said, "New subscribe and follow. I love everything with this." She then goes on to say, "I love Geek Mom." So there we go. We're back to the status quo again now. My mum won't do this, and it amazes me that your mum did. Much love from the Philippines.
Love you.
And she also ended with saying, "Skippy, my man."
Yay.
Obviously, you left your obligatory comment saying that you very much enjoyed it. Lovely guest, lots of laughter, and great listening on a Sunday afternoon. So that was cool. So thank you for that.
That's right.
Thank you for your feedback. Oh, and then also Jessie commented on your comment and said, "Geek Mom, you're absolutely awesome. Clap, clap emojis."
Can't help it, Dom.
Oh, I know. Okay, so then we go on to Melly Playful. So Mel left us another comment this week, and she said, "I agree with retro." So she agreed with the comments about like retro stuff being better. So I think again that was you had mentioned that last week. So she's on board with you, and she also said, "Your mom is so cool. I like you too, Dom. Lol." She then was a bit of an apology. She said, "Oh gosh, I never saw you ask about Fear the Walking Dead. I just lost interest for some reason. I loved the first season so much that I bought it, but I was so annoyed with the characters in the second season." So she kind of dipped off because of that. "I want to answer Skippy about the show everyone likes, but I didn't like. Please don't throw stones. So yeah, I gritted my teeth a little bit when I read this. So, but we'll try and be, everybody has their own individual tastes. She said, Doctor Who, I just can't get into it.
Oh.
Obviously, we're Doctor Who fans, so sort of, that's a shame you couldn't get into it. But, each to their own.
Indeed.
Skippy is a wonderful guest, and she then again agrees with you. I hate when they remake things sometimes, but there's one remake I loved, June. Then they did Children of June. It was amazing. You ever seen them? I can't say that I've ever seen any new June stuff. I only ever watched the original movie that had Sting and Carl McLachlan in it. I've never seen any of the updated stuff. Have you? No. So yeah, there you go. There you go, Mal. No, we've never seen them.
But thumbs up to June.
Yeah. June is a great film, though. She said JJ is amazing, so she agreed with us about liking JJ Abrams.
JJ Abrams.
I'm going to have to look into American Gothic. I've never seen it, never even heard of it. So hopefully you will, and hopefully you'll like it.
Wow. Yes.
Season 2 of Castle Rock. I'm so excited. Yep, us too.
Yay.
And yeah, she just generally said that she really enjoyed the podcast. So thank you very much,
Brilliant.
Mel.
Thank you very much.
Then Tori, Nacho Cat. Nacho Cat says, oh, here we go again. I love Geek Mom.
Oh.
It was awesome to see Skippy on here. Great episode, guys and gal. And happy 25th. Also, I still love Star Trek The Next Generation. I can rewatch that show over and over. I really liked Voyager as well. And she has a question. I have a question. Of all the Stranger Things seasons, which is your favourite so far?
Oh, hard to pick. Go on, you go.
I would pick season 1 purely because it's what introduced us to this world and these characters and the concept. And, it set everything up.
And that was so little and sweet.
Yeah, well, they all were.
Yeah.
But no, that initial idea and the way that it, straight off the bat, you watched it and you just went, I love this. This is great. The 80s aesthetic and everything about it is just perfect. So as much as obviously I've gone... Oh, there's the Geek Dog. We haven't had him feature for a little while. As much as I enjoyed season 2 and season 3, I would say that the first season is probably, it's probably the best out of the 3 so far.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and what about...
I was going to say the first.
What about you, Tori? Which one do you prefer out of the 3 that we've seen so far? Let us know in the comments for this week's podcast. And then we finish with our buddy. So Skippy comes bounding back into our lives. And he said, another fantastic episode, guys. I especially love that special guest.
Wonder why.
Yeah. So since my awesomeness won't be on the next episode, I'll hit you with a good question straight from the pouch. What is your favorite TV series from the 90s? Now,
wow, so many picks.
Yeah, exactly. That is a really, really tricky question because there are a lot of shows that came out of the 90s. Lots of things that, I actually, I cheated a little bit because I went and I typed into Google, like top 90s TV shows, and the amount that came up, and I was like, God, yeah, and I'd forgotten about this and I forgot about that. Like, for example, do you remember... Now, you might not remember it if I just said the name. You might do, I don't know. But like when I read the synopsis, I went, God, yeah, I remember that show. There was a program called Early Edition. So it was basically about this guy and it was to do with the newspaper. And the newspaper told like the events of the future. And he used that knowledge. It was only him. He would get this newspaper delivered. And there was always this mystery of like, where did this newspaper come from? And it was like the news from a few days in the future. So he would then use that knowledge to try and prevent what was going to happen. What, like if there was a murder or a robbery or whatever. And he was going to use that knowledge of the future to try and save people and help people. And I was like, God, I remember that show.
No.
You don't remember that one?
No, there's a few come to mind, obviously, that era. Obviously, we've got X-Files.
Yeah.
We've got American Gothic. We've got Tales from the Crypt was in the 90s, and also Round the Twist.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's so many. It's like that was quite a good time of life where lots of really cool programs came out, wasn't it? Really.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to pick one. I can't pick one.
I mean,
Sorry.
I would say for me, if you had to push me to pick one, aside from all the obvious ones, so aside from X-Files and aside from American Gothic and aside from Kenan and Kel and Round the Twist and all those kind of things, I would say Buffy. For me, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because obviously I love Buffy.
Because Buffy and Angel were around that time, weren't they?
Yes,
Both
they
of
were.
them.
Yeah, they both started in the 90s.
They were very good. They were very good, yeah.
And obviously they ran for years, and obviously they developed the stories as the years went by. You know, we got more and more as they grew, the show grew and matured, and there was some great, people came off the back of it. I mean, I still, obviously, we don't see him in that much stuff nowadays, but James Masters, who was Spike, was fantastic. Love that guy. And like, yeah, it was just really, and it was funny for us as well from the UK, seeing Giles and going, that's the guy from the Nest Cafe adverts from the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh dear. So yeah, it was.
But yeah, that was a very good series. Yeah, it's like say I can't pick. I'm not going to pick because there was just so many things I enjoyed about the 90s.
Yeah. So
Sorry, Skippy.
Tricky question, but so mum sort of in agreement with me, but at the same time, it's hard to definitively pin one down. So throwing that question back to you, Skippy, then is what do you feel was your favourite series from the 90s? Let us know. I look forward to your response next week. So there we go, guys. So as I said, reiterate the point. Leave us comments. You'll get a mention. Leave us questions. We'll answer them. Leave us feedback.
It's good because it gets us thinking, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So I enjoy the questions from everybody. So it's like, wow, okay, put us on the spot or what?
Right. Okay. Let's move on to the news section. So a very small amount of news this week. Not much.
Dong.
Yes. Hello, good evening. And here is the news.
Over to you, Trevor.
So first thing is there was a wedding. A superhero wedding recently.
Oh.
So Supergirl got married to Kal-El not Kal-El, that's Superman. What's his name? Mon-El.
Mon-El. What, in real life?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So not only were they like a couple in the program, but yeah, they actually became a couple in real life and they just got married. And,
that's nice.
David Harewood.
That's nice.
David Harewood, who's the Martian Manhunter, was the one that officiated the wedding.
Oh, lovely.
So yeah, so that was cool. So that's a little bit of, not TV in the shows, but as adjacent to the TV shows. Now, in keeping with that, though, obviously we are moving ever closer to the return of the Arrowverse shows, and we are moving ever closer to the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, which more and more stuff that the teases are ridiculous, right? So the latest thing with Supergirl was that the events of Crisis on Infinite Earth are going to radically change the future for the Supergirl show. So it's like, what does that mean? Like, where are we going with that? I mean, again, if you go back to the speculation, if you go back to the original story from the comics, the biggest takeaway from that would be, well, it's going to roll into the main Arrowverse. Like they're going to merge all of these different realities, and instead of Kara existing on a separate Earth, she's going to end up being on the same Earth as Barry and Team Arrow and things like that, that they're all going to be in the same place rather than lots of different separate Earths. So maybe it's that. I don't know. Maybe it's going to be the introduction of a villain. It's going to be something to do with one of the main characters. Who knows what it's going to mean, but it's apparently going to be a big deal. So that was one of the things. Now, the other thing is to do with, again, more people being added to this lineup. So there's going to be so many characters and so many cameos and stuff in this crossover. They've confirmed that, do you remember Jonah Hex, the cowboy guy that we met in Legends?
Yes.
So he's coming back. So he's going to be in it. So that implies that either they're going to go back to the Old West or they're going to bring him into the present day to stand alongside the heroes in, whatever fight they're going to have to get into. So it's like, okay, that's cool. So we're going to get to see the sort of hero from the Wild West days reappearing. They've also confirmed that John Wesley Shipp is returning, which I was like, well, I wasn't that surprised when I read that, because I thought, oh, you can't not have him in it, because he's the Flash. So we're going to get to see the original Flash, who plays it's Jay Garrick, isn't it, that he plays now?
Yes.
Like his character. Yeah. So he's going to show back up. What I'd like to know as well is whether they're going to pick up on that plot thread, because if you remember, if I'm correct here, the last time we saw Jay was that time. Do you remember that time when they had the three Flashes? So it was Jesse, and it was Barry, and it was Jay, and they had to team up together because there was a bomb, and they were trying to use the Speed Force to stop it, and they had to put everybody into Flash time, and eventually Jay had to stop because he was like, I can't sustain this. I'm going to need to stop, and so he froze. And when they eventually did save the day, at the end of the episode, when Jay was saying his goodbyes and that, he said he was going back to his Earth and he was thinking about hanging up, the costume. And he said he had a protege that he was going to start training. So you were like, oh, so there's going to be another speedster. But they've not picked up on that again since, about the fact that he was obviously going to mentor a new Flash on his Earth. So it's like, will they pick up on that? And will we see not just Jay Garrick, but also whoever his new protege is going to be? So I'm hoping that's a thread that they pay off. I mean, they're normally pretty good with doing that. If they sow a seed, they normally do pick back up on it further on down the line.
They do, yeah.
So that's that news. But the big news, and this is big news. So in recent years, we have seen DC kind of relax a little bit in terms of allowing multiple versions of their characters appear across different medium. So we saw it in Titans. We actually got the whole thing with Batman, and then we now know going into season 2, Batman is going to be a part of the second season of Titans. So previously, like they could mention Gotham City, or they could make allusions to Batman or things, because they did it years ago in Arrow. They made little throwaway remarks about this billionaire that runs around at night dressed up and things like that. They made these little asides that you were kind of like, oh, they're talking about Batman, nudge nudge, wink wink, but they could never really go fully into it, because DC movies were like, yeah, you can't do this, you can't use that, you can't say this, that kind of thing. But then that's all been changing. Like I said, we've seen this with Titans. We've also now seen it in the Arrowverse, because they started directly referencing Gotham. And in fact, they went to Gotham in the last crossover. And as a result of that, we've now got Batwoman starting in October as well, alongside the other shows. So this thing about Batman being off limits is kind of slowly going away. And that's then filtered through into the crossover, because as I mentioned a few weeks back, Kevin Conroy, who used to voice Batman in the animated series, is going to be in this as Bruce Wayne / Batman, as an older Batman. So we're going to get a form of, whether he's in the costume or whether he's just Bruce Wayne, I don't know, but we're going to get that character in this crossover. It looks like we may also be getting the Joker.
Oh, wow.
And not just any Joker. It looks like we're getting a very big name. So this is cute.
Jack.
We've already had him on the... No, not that name, no. But we've already had him in the Arrowverse before, which was cool. And the fact that he's coming back again, and he's potentially playing the Joker, who he played again in the animated series. He was the voice of the Joker, and he was also the voice of the Joker in all the Batman games. Mark Hamill.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Luke Skywalker himself.
Ooh.
That's pretty awesome. When I saw that, I was like, wow. I mean, like I said, I know he's been in it before, because he was in The Flash as the Trickster that time.
That's right, yes, he was,
so
yes.
we had him in that. I think he's been in it twice. He was in one episode, and then he was in that other one where he had did he have a son? And there was like, the son was trying to take over from him and stuff like that.
Yeah, there was definitely 2 bits where he was in it. Yeah, definitely. He was good as that, wasn't he?
And the Trickster is always... he's always been like a kind of Joker-esque villain anyway. He's always been very much like this character's very much molded off of the Joker. But again, you know, it was a character that seemingly was off limits. They couldn't really do the Joker and things like that. They allowed a variation of the Joker on the Gotham show, but nothing else was really able to sort of do anything with the Joker. But the fact that, I mean, he may not be the Joker, he may be the trickster again, but the betting money is on the fact that he's going to be the Joker, because if you've got the guy from the same animated show is going to be Batman, then you go, well, surely you're going to have Mark Hamill as the Joker. Surely that logically that would marry up, you know. So we will have to wait and see. But I was quite excited by that. I thought that's pretty cool, big casting news. The fact that he's going to be a part of this crossover. So yeah, and also a existing cast member is again undergoing another transformation, and it looks like we might be getting 2 versions of Harrison Wells that are going to feature in this year's Flash and also in the crossover. So we're going to get our fix of Wells.
Oh, we love Harrison.
So it won't be Sherlock, or it won't be HW or any of the other. It's going to be another, you know, iteration of the character, but not
another creation.
Yeah, not just 1, but 2. So that's interesting that we're going to get 2 versions. But I don't know how they play in or how they fit in or anything like that. So there's as much as they're giving us stuff, they're being very clever with what they're putting out there, because there's no context to anything. You know, it's just like there's this person and this person's coming back and we're going to have this thing, and then you're like, but I don't know how it all fits together and I don't know what it all means or anything like that. So it's really good. So they're giving enough to sort of keep you teased, but they're not they're not sort of overtly kind of spoiling anything, you know.
Brilliant.
So it's just getting that hype running and getting that excitement running. So yeah, so that's basically it. That's all the news I have for this week. So now I'll go back to
over to you in the studio.
Back to you in the studio. Yeah. Da, 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 da. Oh, one other little tiny thing. Picking up
back to Trevor again.
No, one little tiny thing. Just going back to last week is that I'd said about Titans season 2 and about Netflix and stuff. They still haven't given us a date, but they have confirmed it will indeed be on Netflix. So they're going to do what they did last year. They'll have it airing on the DC Universe app in the States, and then it will be jumping over to Netflix. And if you go on to Netflix now and you go over Titans, it does actually say another season is coming or something along those lines. So they've
it shows a trailer.
Yeah, so they made the announcement, but they just haven't given us a date yet. But we were unsure, weren't we? Last week we were like, well, I think it's probably going to, but yeah, now it's confirmed it is definitely going to be on Netflix, just like season 1. So that's cool.
Right, brilliant.
So there we go. So that's everything. So we're now going to move on into our reviews for this week, and that's going to be Fear the Walking Dead. Then that's going to be followed by our finale of Stranger Things, season 3, and then finishing with Preacher.
Yep.
So here we go then. So Fear the Walking Dead, episode 13. Quite funny. Episode 13 on Friday the 13th. And this episode was called Leave What You Don't, which is obviously one of the things they leave on their little signs. So take it away.
Take it away. Right, so the beginning, we saw Logan before Polar Bear's demise.
Yes.
Out on the road, leaving boxes, and he got an SOS from a woman called Serena, who needed help. And he was trying to get hold of Polar Bear, because he said, are you near her? Can you go? And couldn't get hold of him, so he decided to go himself. He was rushing like a madman in his truck, and he ran out of gas.
Yeah.
So he just ran. It basically just got out of the truck and ran and ran and ran and ran. And he was too late. By the time he got there, the walkers had got the person. So he was gutted, wasn't he? He was absolutely gutted.
Yeah.
And then, so he came out of the building, and these horsemen arrived. So, like, who are these people? Because do you remember what she said? I can't remember her name now, the woman. The woman was the leader, wasn't she?
Okay, so she's called Virginia, and she said that basically...
Ginny for short,
yeah, that's right, Ginny for short. And she said that they'd been watching him, And basically that she wanted to help him. And she said, about joining up with them and that they, together they can do sort of bigger and better things or something along those lines. And she said that she had stuff that she wanted to discuss with him. And then he was kind of like, okay, I'm interested, sort of thing. And then it sort of left
it
that,
and went
we
back
didn't
to the
know
present
anymore.
day, didn't it?
Yeah.
So basically, we saw the kids and these rats, and basically they put them in a trap, and they were powering something, which was obviously the fuel. So basically, these walkers were walking around because there was a rat in a cage, and then that was doing something which was refining the fuel, wasn't it? It was going through something else, and then it was coming out. And we had, is it
Luciana? Yeah.
Yeah, so Luciana and, was it Wes?
Well, no, what's his name?
No.
Wendell.
Wendell, that's it. They were there sorting all this stuff out. So they were sort of seeing how this production line was going. So that's super cool. So obviously last week we'd ended with Logan outside this foundry.
Yeah.
Now, unbeknown to us, that they were in the foundry. This is our guys in the foundry doing this for the fuel, but he turns up, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And turns around and says he wants all of it. He just like, basically, I'm having all of it. And they weren't very happy with that, were they?
No, not at all. What I will say just quickly is I'm sure that thing that they used, it's got a name, but I can't think of what it is at the moment. The wheel thing, because as you said, they had the walkers tied to it, and then in front of every walker hanging up was a rat in the cage. And so what would happen is the walkers were obviously walking, but they were walking in a circle because they're chained up to this wheel. Yes. And as they walked around trying to get to the rats that are hanging in front of them, that wheel then drove all the mechanisms to help refine the oil. And I was like, this thing is familiar. I can't think of what they're called, but it was a very clever usage of both of the of the zombies to put them to work and help with this process. It was quite clever in an era where actual machinery and stuff is hard to come by, because obviously that would be an automated process normally. But they used their ingenuity and was like, well, we've got these zombies that just keep walking, so let's put them to use.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just thought that was quite a clever little thing. So then from the showdown,
sorry, you carry on from there.
So after the showdown in the foundry, that's when we did we jump over to Alicia?
Yeah, we had Alicia and her paintings. Again,
yeah.
Hoping to find Wes. And they heard SOS on the radio from the oil fields. And I think they linked up with John and June, and they said we'll go. We'll head off to the oil field. Back at the oil field, Logan had found the journals that they'd been hiding from him.
Before you go any further, sorry. So as well as the exchange about the oil fields, they also had obviously this thing about the girl that reached out to them for help. So they got an SOS call, didn't they? And so then it was like, well, they're going to have to go off to try and deal with this SOS.
Oh, yeah, they had their SOS was for help for another person saying, help me. And so because of that, they decided to go there, Alicia and Strand. And so that meant that John and June had to go towards the oil field.
Yeah.
But like I say, back at the oil field, he found the journals and he decided to burn them. And Luciano was fuming. It's like everything he comes up with. He said it's all rubbish or something like that, wasn't it? It was really like...
Well, yeah, because there was nothing in the journals about the refining process.
No.
Because that's what he wanted to know. He's like, okay, we found the place. We know all the oil's here, but we don't know how to refine it. And when he looked in the journals, there was nothing in the journals. So he's like, well, these are useless then. What good are these? Yeah. I'm going to throw them in the fire. And he also, that's when he revealed like how they'd been able to track them down, because he said that they'd gone through all the tapes, because he was like, oh, you kindly document everything.
One of you slipped up or something, didn't he? He said, he didn't say who, but he said, one of you slipped up and that's how we found where you were.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, no.
Also, a very interesting little bit of dialogue, which is quite important, really, is that he implied that, because she said, well, why are you doing this? Why all of this? Why all of this, hostility and all of this kind of stuff? And he was like, you don't understand. He was like, you're out here trying to help people. Well, so am I. But what I'm trying to do is bigger. And he was sort of implying that there was something else going on here that was, a bigger thing. And that I then my brain started going, and I was like, what's the implication here? What is his actual end game here? What is his goal? So that little bit of seemingly innocuous dialogue is actually very important.
Yeah.
So go on.
So then we had Logan's guys were going along, and there was a roadblock.
Yeah.
There was all these boxes.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, "What's going on here?" And in the boxes were like Sarah and Dwight.
Yeah.
That was hilarious. That was brilliant.
Yeah, that was good.
And she's so mean, Sarah, wasn't she?
Mm-hmm.
So like, so the guy that Dwight had given a chance, he said, "Well, you had your chance, and your chance is gone now."
Yeah.
So they took over their vans, because obviously if they came towards the oil field, Logan would think it's his guys. So they took him, and they got in the vans and went towards the oil field.
Mm-hmm.
And John and June had also got there. They were up higher.
Yeah.
And yeah, so basically she got there, and they told them, didn't they say they wanted them to let the children go? Because they had guns on him. He had guns on Luciano and the kids. And they said, at least let the children leave. And the children go, "We don't want to leave. We're helping." And they goes, "No, you go. Get the kids out of the way," sort of thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because they obviously the just sort of filling in the blanks a little bit there. Yeah, John and June arrived there, and they were clever. They didn't go straight marching in. They got a high vantage point, so they could see down into the quarry and see what was going on, scope out everything. Yeah. So they're there to sort of like try and figure out, okay, how are we going to provide support? We got to work a plan out from up here. And then meanwhile, the trucks turn up at the quarry, and Logan just assumes that it's his guys, but then obviously gets the surprise when it's not his guys. And then they had the standoff thing. Then that was the bit then, wasn't it, with the shot? And then he was stood there and he was like going, "You're not going to shoot me," because he saw like where the shot came from, and he was like talking in the direction of John and sort of saying, "You're not going to shoot me. You could have killed me before now. Nobody's going to kill me," and all of this. Like, he's like, "You're not that kind of person." And you saw John, and he was like, his finger was pulling on the trigger, and you're like, "Is he going to do it? Is he going to do it?" And then he was going, "You're not going to kill me. You're not going to kill me," and all of this stuff. And then that was then when they tried to negotiate a deal, and he said, "Well, look," he said, "Here's the deal." He's like, "I'm not a bad guy," and he's like, "We'll let the kids go, but you basically got to help us with this refinement process," because Luciano obviously knew how to do it all. So he's like, "You're going to help us to get all this oil made into gas, and in exchange, I'll let you take a truck, and the kids can leave." And the kids are like, "No, we don't want to leave. We can help." And they're like, "No, it's a good idea. Yeah, you leave. Go and meet up with the rest of the convoy at the rendezvous point. You know where that is, don't you?" Sort of, without giving any details.
Telling anybody, yeah.
So they're okay. Oh, right, yeah, fine, we'll go, sort of thing. So then they headed off. We
had a little bit with Alicia and Strand on the way to help the woman, but they ran out of fuel, didn't they? Again.
Yeah.
How weird is that?
I know the whole thing with running out of fuel was a common theme, wasn't it? And they'd obviously been in constant contact with this woman, telling her, "Don't worry, we're on our way, we're going to be there soon," and all of this lot. She was trying to keep her talking, "What's your name?" and all of this sort of thing. "Don't worry, we're going to save you." And they decided that they were going to get out and just go on foot to get to this place where this girl was.
Yeah. And meanwhile, back at the oil field, Sarah took Logan. That's when she took him into that cabin, wasn't it? She talked to him.
Yeah.
And he started blaming her for it. It was all her fault, basically.
Well, this was interesting.
Everything was Sarah's fault.
Yeah, because that was then, it turned out, if you tie back into the opening, so the reason he couldn't get hold of Polar Bear, the reason that he couldn't get the help he needed at that time was because that was also the same timeline that Wendell and Sarah stole his truck and basically, obviously killed the guys. So that's set in motion the things that meant that they created their own villain, because they didn't realize at the time the bigger implications, but because of what they did and from stealing the truck, so Polar Bear died, so Logan couldn't get hold of him, which meant he wasn't able to save this woman, which then left him broken as a result of it, which then left him to meet these other people, which you then go, this is clearly why he then started going down a different path, why he diverged from his friends' ideals of helping others, and it was all because of Sarah and Wendell stealing the truck.
Yeah. And outside, they noticed there was loads of walkers were diverging on the oil field, and the fire was getting too hot.
That's right. Yeah, they had a burner, a thing that they were like refining it in, weren't they? And the flames were getting out of control or something.
Well, Luciano kept saying we have to slow it down, and he was going, no, and he was trying to push the walkers himself, wasn't he? Going, because one of them got shot, didn't they? Because John had shot one.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then he was like, come on, help me. And then there was a massive explosion.
Yeah.
Dwight and the gang jumped in their cars.
Mm-hmm.
Logan's people also bailed on it.
Yeah.
And it was just him left there and going, no, and all panicking. And Sarah didn't want to leave him, did she? She wanted to save him.
Mm-hmm.
She said, you guys, if I don't come back, just leave. I'll go. I need to sort this out. And she was try to save him, didn't she?
Yeah.
And while she was trying to do that, they realised the SOS message from the woman was from the same place that he'd went all those years before.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, let her know there's a gun. They said, I left a gun in there when I went before. And he's like, basically, if she can't if no one comes, basically kill yourself so at least you can't turn into a zombie.
Yeah.
So that's what he was trying to, that's what he was relaying on the walkie, because Alicia and Strand had lost the walkie comm had run out, so they couldn't get hold of the woman.
And they were
she was still coming through going, I'm still panicking. And
they were still quite far out, weren't they? They were still not any closer to her. And obviously by this point,
Sarah's walkie was still working, and she got the message. So he told Sarah to tell her there's a gun there, blah, 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 blah. We also had another rescue mission arrive at the oil field, which was the Rabbi and company.
Yeah.
Who'd come to clean up.
Clean up. they were the cavalry, weren't they? And they showed up to help take out all these walkers that were getting drawn in by the smoke from the fire. And you just had this sort of, it was a real standoff, really, was that, you'd had Logan's guys had buggered off. You had some of the other heroes had got out there because they'd been told, take the tanker and get out of here because we need to at least have some gas. And then you had Logan and Sarah hold up. And then you had these lot around the outside taking pot shots at the walkers, trying to, to sort of prevent them from causing any problems. Yeah. So it was quite an interesting, because obviously it got nighttime at this point, hadn't it? And it was like the day had been gradually going on. So it was a good thing that they turned up when they did.
And in the shack where the woman was, basically she was getting overrun. Alicia and Strand were still far away from her. So she got the gun and they were all coming towards her, and she was just about to shoot herself. And then suddenly...
Wait. Dramatic moment here. This whole thing was so tense because you had everybody could hear what was playing out on the radio, and it was horrible because you're like, we are basically witnesses to this woman's demise. We're all here listening, knowing that this woman is going to die and nobody's there to save her, and we're hearing it all play out. And you could hear obviously the doors breaking and the zombies coming in, and she sat there and she's got this gun with the one bullet in. So she's not going to be able to take any zombies out. Her only option is going to be to shoot herself. And it kept jumping backwards and forwards between our heroes listening really tensely and back to her sat there. And you kept getting the shots of the zombies coming in the building and getting closer and closer to her. And then you go back to Sarah and Logan, and they're sat looking at the radio, and then you just hear bang. And then it goes quiet. And you're like, oh my God, so she had to kill herself. That was really awful. But then you hear bang, 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 bang. And they're all like, what's going on? What's happening? There's more gunshots. What's going on there? And then, it turns out somebody had come to her rescue, and it was Wes, who we haven't seen for a couple of weeks. But even though he left them all and seemingly was like, oh, I'm like just really self-centered and stuff, he had overheard the chatter on the radios, and he was basically like, he does have a conscience, and I can't leave this person in this situation. If I can help in the same way that I was helped, then I'll go and do it. And he did. And then it was this thing then about how that sort of trickles forward into the conversation with Sarah and Logan, where it was like almost this whole thing proved a point to him. And she said, these people, what we're doing, this is having an impact, because if we hadn't helped this guy, then that situation would have ended very differently. But because we helped him, he then was aware that someone else was in need, so he went and helped her. And in the same way that we were getting overrun by these zombies, but this woman that we saved from, her house that was in the middle of a minefield, and this rabbi that we saved, they came along at the right time to help take out the zombies that were approaching the quarry.
Yeah.
And so again,
he came round to a way of thinking, didn't he? Realised, like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
basically,
and he could then
realised.
see, he had that
Like,
epiphany moment.
He went back to like the way he used to think previously when he was with Polar Bear.
Yeah,
and he agreed that it is still worth doing. When back at the shack, when Strand and Alicia got there, realised that Wes had saved her, the woman apparently told them she was on the run from somebody.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, is she on the run from?
Mm.
So anyway, back at the oil field, some of Logan's men that hadn't buggered off were still pointing guns at everybody. Then, because of the chat with Sarah, told them all to stop. And then all of a sudden, we hear a shot.
And then we hear
somebody shot.
Yeah, somebody shot Logan, and then all the rest of his people get gunned down too. And you're just like, what the hell's going on? Like, who's just taken the guy out and all of his people? What? It was so like, I was like, what's happening? It really sort of brought me to attention, that bit. And then
it's like,
in comes the cavalry. Well, not the good cavalry.
Loads of horsemen and loads of people as well as just the horsemen.
Yeah, there was lots
and they
of
were the pioneers, settler. Oh, sorry, pioneers.
Yeah,
sorry.
not the pioneers.
Not pioneers.
Yeah,
I wrote pioneers.
The pioneers. Yeah.
They're the settlers. And come
on,
you can remember what they were talking about.
Well, they're the people that we saw in the beginning. So the people that we saw in the very beginning with Logan, that's this lot. And they come in and they're all like cowboys. They're all on horseback. Like I said, there were a lot of people on foot as well, but there was lots of them. And they surrounded the quarry. There were that many. They were all up the top on their horses, and then they all came into the quarry as well. And leading the charge was this woman, this Virginia, or Ginny, depending on what you want to call her. And she comes forward, and you're just like, wow, okay, what's happening here? And she explains, basically, she had to kill Logie because he was a liability, and that he had made her a deal with her, and he'd made promises that he couldn't deliver upon and stuff like this. And then that's why I said the whole thing that he said was important, because then you connect the dots and go, when he's hooked up with her at the beginning, she said about they could make something bigger, create something bigger. He then obviously said that point about, you don't understand what I'm doing. The reason I need this oil is for something bigger. And then you go, he was working, maybe not working for her per se, but he was working
but alongside
her. But he obviously was not, he wasn't in charge, she was in charge. And in her mind, he failed. His job was to obviously secure all of this oil, make sure that it was all made, but obviously not upset people along the way. But instead, that's exactly what he did. So therefore, he was a liability, had to be taken out of the equation. And she's like, I want to deal with you now. So she's like, so him and all his people are gone. So now instead, you've got this quarry. We want the quarry. We want the oil. You know how to sort it out. We can help you. We are building a new future. There are lots of us, as you can see, and there are many more. And we are repopulating this world. And we've got big plans and we've got big things going on. And we are we're inviting you to join us. So basically, we want you to join us and they knew all about them because they've obviously watched all of the tapes as well. So they're like, oh, okay, so you're so-and-so and you're and we know this about you, and we know, June, you're looking for a place to settle down, and, you're looking for this, and it was like, wow, these people are very well up to speed with all of our characters. Yeah, she basically says about giving them this deal, and she's like, we'll all help each other out, and life will be great. We'll find a place for you to settle and all of this lot. And they're like, why should we trust you? You just came in here and just killed all these people because they failed a deal. Why would we want to make a deal with you when we've seen the outcome of making a deal with you if you don't like the direction that deal's going in? And she's like, yeah, okay, maybe, we're a bit ruthless, but in the long run, it'll be a good thing because people will look back on what we did and see we did it for a reason. And that's the key point. There will be people to look back upon what we did, and so she sort of she's making a very good argument, but they're like, how can we trust you based on what you've done? So they're like, no, thank you. No, you can do it yourself. You make the gas.
And then they said, we need somebody to help us. So somebody's going to help. One of us who's going to help us. And Luciano volunteered.
Guns, didn't they? Well, yeah, because they all pulled their guns out, and they're like, well, if you're not going to join us, you're not going to help us, then you're not really any use to us. So they were heavily outgunned and outmanned. So you're like, they're not going to win this shoot, even though John was like, we've been in tighter spots than this kind of thing, and you're like, John, this is a fight you can't win. And that's when Luciana said, look, let everybody go. I'll stay here with you. I will get on with doing, I'll help you. I know the process. Let everybody go and be on their way, and that'll be the end of that. And they're all like, no, you can't do that. You can't. And she's like, look, it's the only way that everybody gets out of here in one piece. So she's like, okay, that's fine. I'm happy with that deal. And she's like, you can all go on your way. And she says, if you change your mind, you know where to find us. We're going to be out there, and you're going to be seeing more and more of us because we're spreading across this land more and more. And she agreed that they could take a tanker and a few of the vehicles, and that was that. And then they all left. As they left, you saw the camera shot of them looking back at sort of Luciana stood there with all these people, and she's
and Logan dead,
and all the dead bodies, and that was that.
And we were shocked because basically we thought the big bad for this series was Logan.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. These new people on horseback are the baddies. Or what are they? Whatever they are.
I'm very confused by all of this because we are now, that was 13 episodes. We've got 3 left. So they've done what they did last year in that they brought in a villain right near the end of the season, because they did that last year with that crazy lady as well. They only brought her in towards the final part of the season, and then they wrapped up her story really quickly, because at the time we thought she was going to be like their nemesis going into this season, didn't we?
Yeah.
And then they wrapped her up within 3 episodes or something. So I'm hoping that's not going to be the case with this lot, that they're going to go, right, here's these new group of baddies, and then by the end of the season, they'll all be dispatched. I'm hoping this is actually going to carry on into the next series. But it just really confused me, because I thought in 13 episodes, we've now been introduced to our 3rd antagonist of the show. So in the very beginning, we got the soldiers that are tied to the main Walking Dead show. And you're thinking, these are going to be the bad guys. These are going to be the ones they're going to have to deal with in this new part of the country they found themselves in. That all got wrapped up in a couple of episodes. And it turned out that there was only one person there, and they weren't antagonists. You then got introduced to, obviously, the whole concept of Logan and his people. And you're like, oh, he's an intriguing villain because he's not a straight up, sort of Negan level villain or anything like that. He's sort of like, I just want what's mine and blah, blah, blah. And they had a few interactions, and it seemed threatening, but never overtly hostile. And then he gets wiped out, and now we're introduced to a 3rd set of villains. And you're like, do they just have production meetings where they just go, yeah, this story's not working, rip the script up, we'll forget about where we were going with that, we'll kill them off, and we'll move on to this next batch of characters? It's like...
It is weird, isn't it?
Very, very strange.
It's like they don't know what they're doing.
Very disjointed. But, I mean, for that, as a criticism, that's my criticism, is the fact that it feels very disjointed, and I just feel like they don't know what they're doing. But that being said, this episode, though, was a really good episode because of the way that it moved stuff forward. We got explanations for things. We got this new thing. We got some exciting standoffs, both with the walkers and with this new group of characters. And you also got this intriguing, tantalizing thread about this girl, and that she wasn't just symbolic. She wasn't just a token character to sort of, emphasize the story they were trying to tell. She's clearly important because she's like, I'm on the run from people. And then you go, is it those people? Is she on the run from the pioneers? Or is it someone else?
Yes. So it's like, ooh.
So it was definitely exciting.
more upbeat this week. Probably the best one for a while.
Yeah.
But like I say, now we've got more questions.
I have seen online as well that there was I think it was like a 40% increase in the ratings on this episode or something. So whatever they did, whether we find it disjointed or confusing or whatever, it obviously did a good job of boosting the ratings. So.
Getting people to watch it again.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. Let's wait to see what happens next week.
Indeed, we will. Right then, let's move on to the finale of season 3 of Stranger Things, and this was chapter 8, and this was called The Battle of Starcourt.
Aye. So we had Hopper and the gang in their car heading to the food court because they'd heard the Russians on the walkie-talkie, hadn't they?
Mm-hmm.
So they said, well, obviously that's where we got to go, and Joyce kept saying, is that where the kids are? I was like, I don't know, but this is where they are, so we need to go. Maybe possibly, they didn't really. I think they didn't say whether the children were there. I can't remember now, but anyway, they're heading there. So Elle is in a lot of pain again at the food court. She has something coming out of her leg.
It was like something was growing in it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because it was like moving and pulsating.
Jonathan went into the kitchen, got a knife, and heated it up on the hob. That was gross. He was trying to cut it out of her leg.
Yeah, because they were basically
she was screaming.
Like, the only way we can deal, we've got to cut it out. We've got to get out of there.
But it was like awful. You see their faces, like when he was doing it, and then he made a cut. Then he put his hand in, and then she just couldn't stand it anymore. She goes, "Leave it, I'll do it." So she sort of did it herself, didn't she, with her powers?
Yeah. Oh my God, it was horrible though. That whole scene was so uncomfortable to watch, and I was just tensed up thinking, oh, this is horrible. Just like the way that they played out the pain and stuff, I was like, oh my God. And she got this thing out, and it was this wiggly thing, this horrible little sluggy thing that had.
So it chucked it, like it pulled out of her leg and it went flying.
Yeah.
I saw it on the floor, and then the next thing, stamp.
Yep.
What? And there was Hopper, Joyce, and Murray stood there.
Yeah.
They stood on it.
So they're like, hooray!
Yay,
so now everybody's together properly now. Like all the main cast are all together, and so then
they updated them, didn't they?
Yeah. So they set about. Obviously, they patched up Elle, and then they all discussed what was going on and the fact that what they needed to do, and that's when they divvied up a plan, didn't they? About so some of us need to go here, some of us need to go there, and stuff like that. And so
it was so funny.
Hopper and Joyce.
They decided they had to go into the vault, didn't they?
Yeah.
And Erica and Murray.
That was so fun. What did she keep calling him? What did she call him? Just giving him a name, what was she?
Different name.
Bald Eagle or something. I can't remember.
Bald Eagle. That was his call sign later on, wasn't it? But she was giving him right hell about it all, going, "You don't know what you're doing. We've been in there. All this stuff." This small child, who are you? I'm Erica.
He's like, who is this small annoying person? And she's like, hey, I'll have you know, blah, blah, blah. Oh, she's so sassy.
And Dustin's all like, Dustin said, me and Erica, we could navigate, blah, blah, blah. And then Hopper looked at him and he went, no. That's not happening. And then he realised that he could help him, but he had to do it from a distance. And he said, well, obviously, remember, near the beginning, he set up the big antenna on the big hill because trying to get hold of Susie.
Yeah.
And he said, we can do it from a distance. So Robin, Steve, Dustin and Erica were told they could take the Todd father.
Yeah.
We're saying, wow, look at this car.
Uh-huh.
And they were going to go off to the mountain. And Will, Nancy and Jonathan and Elle were going to go to Murray's house. And he was like going, this is the top lock, this is the middle lock, this is all the locks for his secret little hideaway. Yeah. So that was the plan. Hopper, Murray and Joyce were going to go to the vault and sort out what Alexis were told them. So that was basically off they were going.
Yeah.
So Hopper and the gang the three went off towards the gate. And then we had Nancy and the gang going off to a car, but a car wouldn't start.
Yeah.
And they realised, he checked the engine, he went, well, the ignition cable's missing. And then they heard a car revving in the car park, and it was Billy.
Yeah, and he sat there just
no, staring
at them.
Yeah.
Just sat there with his car looking really menacing. And again, it was so 80s. It's like, I've seen that shot of like a villain in a car just being all menacing and stuff. It's like that is a scene that's been in other 80s movies. I can't think of a specific example right now, but just looking at it, it was just like, this reminds me of something. It's reminiscent of something. And he's all obviously all messed up, isn't he? Because he's all been, he's taken over by the mind flayer and that. So he's all like, eyes all weird and, black goo in his eyes and stuff like that. And they're like, we need to get out of here. We need to get out of here. Because he's like, they're watching them. So it was like, oh dear, that's not good.
Well, yeah, because, basically, that they showed them that. We did see Murray and the gang going off in the lift ready to go down to the vault. And as they got out, there was a load of Russians. So Murray was, because obviously I couldn't see any of the subtitles. So Murray was chatting to, I remember he said something, was it tequila? He said something about drink, I think.
Oh, well,
he was talking to the Russian guy.
What was funny was that they got disguises and he said, let me do all the talking. And he said, if anybody tries to speak to you, just kind of nod and just say yes and, stuff like that, or laugh. He said, don't, leave the talking to me. So then they go in this little truck thing and they're all dressed as like Russians and they get stopped at the checkpoint and the guy's like...
Before that, when they first got out the lift, they got out the lift the first time and Murray was chatting to the soldier, trying to talk him round, and instead of just talking him round, Hopper got his gun and just killed them all. Then they got in the car and got dressed up.
Right, okay. It's because when you said about the tequila and stuff, because that was the conversation he had with the guy that was in the...
He had some sort of conversation to the... Oh, right, maybe got the... I remember there was an alcohol reference. Yeah, so basically he killed them all, and he goes, well, we could have done it my way, so they all dressed up in Russian paraphernalia and were going along in the little Russian cart, weren't they?
Yeah.
And that's when they met another guy. That's where he had to chat with him.
And it was Murray... It's like a checkpoint, and he was taught. He's like, I haven't seen you, and he's like, oh, we're new. We've just come here, and he's like, oh, the hours and however many hours the day and all this stuff. And he's like, am I right? And the guy's like, yeah. And then he's like, but at least we have each other, and we have what was it? No, it wasn't tequila because they're Russian. It was vodka.
It wasn't tequila. It was something else.
It was like some kind of vodka or something like that. It might have been Smirnoff or something. But the guy's like, yeah. And then because he sort of said that, he was like, we have because I'm trying to remember, because obviously you didn't see the subtitles, but I'm trying to remember what it said. Something like, we have each other, brother, and we also have, plenty of liquor or something. The guy's like, yes, we do. And he's like, ha ha ha. And they're all laughing. And then the other two were like, ha 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 ha. Like, let's laugh as well and play along. And then he's like, okay,
they just carried
you
on,
seem legit, off you go, sort of thing. So, and they're like baffled by him, and he's like, what? And they're like, you're just having these like chatty conversations. And he's like, well, you have to make it look realistic, you have to make it believable, sort of thing.
Yeah, so they got to the vent, and Murray, I think that was when Murray radioed Dustin to get some more info about where he had to go. So obviously he was going to go into the vent. The other two were waiting until he'd done what he has to do. Then they had to get into the control room.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, he goes into the vent. They're stood there. The cyber soldier arrives and sees all the dead soldiers. Gets out the lift, and all the dead soldiers is like, whoa, he's on their case. And now, while they were waiting to hear from Murray, we had this nice little Joyce and Hopper's chat about a potential date at the place where she stood him up.
Yeah.
And it's like so funny. There's like, well, maybe, you pick me up. Oh, no, can't do that. She has to watch. What's the program he said she has to watch?
I don't know. But it was all to do with this idea about her leaving town. And she said, well, we could see about having a conversation about that. And he's like, a date? And she's like, if you what? And he's like, and it was so funny because then they were both really kind of sheepish, like being like teenagers or something.
Yeah, it's quite cute.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, Dustin and Co were off to the antenna, and they were talking about Susie in the car, taking the mick out of Dustin.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to drive up this big hill, and Steve was like, yeah, I'm gonna get up there. And they was going, you're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. And he got halfway and they didn't make it.
Yeah, that's right.
So they had to get out. While they were trying to get up to the antenna, you could hear Mike sending an SOS to Dustin, basically telling them, Billy's here. We can't leave. We need your help.
Yeah.
No one actually responded to that. So Mike and that got back in the food court, and they decided to get the ignition cable from the upturned car that was on the display, because he was going, I know how we do it. We use that. And they go, what, we're going to drive that? Does it work? And no, I just need the ignition cable out of it.
Yeah.
But because it had been upturned by Elle that time, when she arrived
when she threw it across the room, yeah.
So like, okay, they've got to now somehow get it down. And they were trying, and she goes, I'll do it. And then not strong enough, bless her. Her powers were so weak that in the end they did use something. What was it they were pushing it with? Because it was when Mike said, "Told you, it's all about physics or something."
Yeah, they were on about using a I can't remember what it's called now. Yeah, but I can't remember what the actual, not a counterweight or something. I can't remember something about how they could flip it and stuff. Yeah.
So basically, they got the car down, and they were trying to looking for the ignition lead. Meanwhile, Elle was going around through the bins and got a can, like a Coke can, what we'd seen previously when she was basically a prisoner in that sort of laboratory place. She could make a can crush.
Well, that's when they were trying to teach her how to use her powers.
Yeah.
And we saw that in season.
The papa was trying to teach her.
Yeah.
And she was thinking, I've got to see if I can do that. And she couldn't. She was too weak. She couldn't smash it. And then they realised the monster was outside the mole on top of it.
Yeah.
It's like, no. And it crashed through the ceiling, didn't it?
That whole section was so creepy, though, because you got just the shadow taking over the roof, because a lot of it was glass and stuff. And you just see this thing climbing up on top of the building. And you're like, oh, my God, this isn't good. So they all like hiding. And then it was the weight, wasn't it? I assume because of how big and heavy it was, it cracked all the glass and it just fell through into the building. And it was just right slap bang in the middle of the mall, just there, like, rah, sort of thing. And you're like, oh, man, this is bad, because Elle can't do anything. They're all like hiding, and they're like, what they're going to do? Everyone else is all over the place. It's like, this is not good at all. This is not a good scenario for our heroes to be in at this point.
Yeah. So we had Murray getting directions from Dustin and Erica about the vents.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, Dustin spotted the monster, like in the distance, going towards the mall, didn't he?
Yeah, because it was a weird thing, wasn't it? Where we'd already we already see it get to the mall, but then we got like almost like it was a bit early, like earlier on before it got to the mall, that they spotted it on top of the mountain and they were trying to radio through to everybody to let them know that it was coming.
Yeah, they were saying, because obviously Mike was trying to get hold of them and saying they needed help, but obviously eventually Steve and Robin heard it.
Yeah.
And said, right, we'll go back. We'll go and see if we can get him out of there.
Yeah.
But while obviously then the stupid monster got the walkie-talkie, didn't it? It smashed the talkie up.
Yeah.
So Dustin then filled in Hopper and the gang about the monster, saying that it's now on the mall.
Mm-hmm.
We got to hurry. You've got to really get on, get cracking on this to Murray and to them, both of them.
Yeah.
So we had I think it was Elle, Max and Mike were hiding, and he goes, what we're going to do, because it was really close to where they were all hiding.
Yeah.
Because I think by that time they're hiding behind the car, weren't they?
Yeah, and it was like, was that the bit where it was sending out all of the like tendril things, like looking for them?
Yeah, looking for them, yeah. And Elle said there was a gap, we could go for the gap, so they charged across and hid, and then it was like, that's when it was looking around the corner, and it grabbed a mannequin at one point, thought it got him, and was like, this isn't real, this is a mannequin. Like, no. And Lucas decided to distract it, and he did a slingshot he popped a balloon, didn't he, or something?
Yeah.
Which made it go away from where they were, which sort of saved their bacon.
Yeah.
It's like, so close.
Mm-hmm.
So then we also had, Murray got to where he had to, and basically he started shutting down everything. That's what he had to do, wasn't it? Shut down all the electrics or something?
Yeah. And then they needed to there was like a box they had to open and put in a code, wasn't it?
Yeah, so they got into the bit they needed to. The code they had didn't work.
And they couldn't work out why.
Planck's constant or something.
Planck's constant, that's right, yeah.
Yeah. So Dustin thinks he knows what to do. Because I know what I can do. So he got older. We finally heard from Salt Lake City, Utah, Susie talking to Dusty Bum.
And this was the best moment in this episode.
Yeah, this is my favourite bit of the whole episode.
Boy, actually,
so we had Dusty
best bit of the whole
Bum.
season.
Yeah, we had Dusty Bum and Susie Poo, or whatever it was, chatting away, and he said, you should know this information. And he goes, well, you have to do something for me. And he goes, oh, I can't, can't do that. She goes, well, I'm hanging up now, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, okay. And he's sitting on the hill with Erica, and he just starts singing Never Ending Story.
And
and then she joined it. Oh, that was great! I could have listened to that for ages.
Adorable, and it was so good.
Wasn't it great?
The way it jumped backwards and forwards, and it had like a split screen, so you had Dustin on one side and her on the other.
And the harmony.
Yeah, and the harmony, and it was so cute.
And everybody, all the teams, wherever they were on the walkie, could all hear it.
And they're all sat like, what's happening here?
Puzzled faces on their head. That was absolutely brilliant. That's another all-time favourite film of mine.
Yeah,
Never Ending Story.
Definitely. But that whole sequence was amazing. It was just so cute, so funny. The way that it started out with them singing it like a cappella, and then the music kicked in the background, and the way it kept jumping backwards and forwards between the characters all listening into this. And it was just so joyful at a moment in the series where everything is like terrible and horrifying, to have this moment that sort of lit. It was like like the whole thing about like the candle being lit in the darkness, it was like that sort of moment.
I know, it was lovely, wasn't it?
Because she was then satisfied because he did that. And she was like, well, this is really easy anyway. And she's like, Planck's constant is, and she did it and
she
gave
the numbers.
And then they put the numbers in, and that was what they needed, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But I was just happy. I was like, she is real. She is a real person. He didn't make her up.
She's a real little nerd. She's a geek.
And what I love as well is like, how cute is Dustin? The fact that when he was talking about before, saying about how hot she is and that she's hotter than Phoebe Cates and all of this lot. And then you get this girl, she's this geeky little girl with glasses and braces and all of this kind of stuff. And it's like, but to him in his eyes, she's as beautiful as this young actress that in that time period in the 80s who was like a pin-up, that's so cute. I was just like, oh, bless.
Loved it. So then obviously back at the mall, they got outside to put the ignition thing in the car.
Yeah.
And Billy decided to rev his car up and come towards them. And Nancy got the gun and she was shooting and shooting and shooting. And he was so close, just about to get him. And then luckily Steve and Robin got to the rescue and they knocked his car flying, didn't they?
Yeah.
It's like, whoo. But the problem is that the monster then came outside, didn't it?
Yeah.
So they managed to get in the car and drive away. It seemed like they were getting away. No, they weren't, because it was following them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no. So Billy got out of his car, it was on fire, got out of the car, and Ellen, Mike, and Max had run off, hadn't they?
Yeah.
And he knocked them two flying and grabbed Elle, started heading back into the main part of the mall with her. It's like, no!
And then obviously the Mind Flayer stopped its pursuit of the others.
Yeah, it realised, didn't it? Because it could smell Elle.
Yeah, and it turned around.
And it's like...
And started going back.
So they had to
turn
turn around and following it, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got Opera and Joyce managed to get in the control room. So they were all ready. They had the keys ready. And then the stupid cyber soldier came in, didn't he?
Yeah, because just a quick...
And then a massive fight.
Quick little thing about this is the fact that the keys, it was one of those ignition things where you have two separate keys to turn this thing off. And they have
to be turned at the same time.
Yeah, and they're spaced apart. So you've got one on the left side, one on the right side of this control panel. So that's a key. That's a key point. That's an important.
That's the key point. Yeah.
Little point.
So they got the keys in, and before they could turn them, the cyber soldier started fighting with Hopper. So Joyce was just like, he knocked her flying as well, I think.
Yeah, that's right. It did. Yeah.
And then they ended up going out to where the drill thing was, didn't they? The fight ended up going out there.
Well, yeah, they were brawling. They were brawling all over the place, and obviously then Hopper tried to get some distance. Then the Grigori or whatever his name is, the Terminator style soldier guy, was chasing him, and they eventually ended up in the gate room with the laser and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And like you said,
they were
leaving
fighting.
Joyce alone.
Joyce could just watch, couldn't she?
Yeah.
So back at the mall, we had Billy who took Elle back to the mall, laid her out and said the normal thing, don't be afraid, it'll be over soon, just try to stay still. And the monster is there and it's going towards her, and then all of a sudden you can hear fireworks, all these fireworks come flying from the top where Lucas and his great plan of the fireworks,
which we talked about previously, yeah.
So he started throwing them, and obviously when it was hitting it and hurting it, Billy was getting it. It affected him, didn't it? When it got slightly damaged, he was like as if he was getting hit by it. It's like, oh.
Well, yeah, because they're connected, obviously, like they're linked in some way, whether it be physically or psychically or whatever. So that whole scene again was awesome because you got this panned out shot, and they're all like on the balconies and stuff, and they're firing various fireworks at the mind flayer, and it's like recoiling and, you know, screaming in pain. And because again, I think a lot of it is also the light, because we learn obviously about the fact that the creatures from the Upside Down don't like bright light, so fireworks produce quite a lot
that was
of light.
Affecting it as well, wasn't it?
So it wasn't just the impact of the explosions, it was also the light that was hurting it. And this was quite fortuitous because Billy got like damaged as a result of it. It meant that Elle was able to sort of, you know, get away, and then he was sort of weakened and stuff. And that allowed her to sort of get into his head.
Yeah. Talked about his memories, about the fact about when he was happy and his mum, and he said something like it was 7 foot that wave you told her and all this, and he kept seeing all the visions that she saw.
Yeah.
And she's trying to get to him,
to get the real Billy to come to the surface.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Dustin was radioing to Joyce and Hopper, saying, "You have to close the gate now. You've got to do it now."
Yeah.
So Joyce was like, "All right, I got 2 keys miles apart, and my arm's going to reach to turn both keys off." She had Hopper out there fighting right out in the danger zone.
Yeah.
What does she do? So and Hopper nodded to her as if to say, "Yeah, you need to do it."
Yeah.
So we left her there, went back to the mall where Billy then decided, because of Elle getting through to him, he then tried to stop the monster himself, didn't he? But it attacked him.
Yeah, there was a really weird moment because, you know, because basically what happened, the way this all came about was because they ran out of fireworks. So the fireworks ran out, and you're like, damn, now they're on the back foot again. And it was like, rah, roar, let's get back on with business type thing. And Billy... because Elle had like made this connection and sort of brought the real persona, the real him, back to the surface, he goes towards the mind flayer without her, and then he's like holding his arms out and basically defying it, like, you're not going to do this, you know, you're not using me anymore. And it was horrible though, because
that was horrible, wasn't it? Because all the tentacles come, like they were getting all sides of him, weren't they? Were going in his sides, all round him, weren't they? It's like pinning him down.
And it mouth thing, the big the.
And he got really angry with it. He sort of shouted at it, did it basically, and then next thing you know, poof, right in his heart.
And and it basically it just completely destroyed him. It killed him. And poor Max was watching all this, and she just sort of crumpled when she realised my brother's just been killed. Because it was bad enough to watch him being tortured like that, but then when it was the final blow. And you were like, oh my God. So in the end, although he was like the antagonist for most of the series, he sacrificed himself to try and
save the day, basically. Saved Elle, didn't he? Yeah. And then obviously, because Joyce had to do the keys and Hopper had given the green light, she turned the keys, didn't she?
But just before she did, obviously, he was finishing his fight in the gate room and came precariously close a few times to going into this big drill laser thing. But then he got the upper hand and he sent the Russian guy into it, didn't he?
Yeah.
Before
but then he sort of give her a nod, is it?
Yeah. So that was before
he gave her the nod to say, do it now. She didn't want to do it because he was out there, but she did it. So basically, the gate started shutting.
So she had
the
to
monster
stretch.
Was dead.
She had to stretch out.
Yeah,
and try
she was
and
really stretching her fingertips to get both the keys. Yeah.
Because then weren't they loads of Russian soldiers at the door behind her? Trying to get in.
Coming towards her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she did that. The drill thing, it all started blowing up, didn't it? All sort of there was all sort of chaos going on out where Hopper was.
Yeah.
And obviously, so the gate started shutting. The monster was dead. Billy was dead. And Hopper was gone.
Yeah, because the reason that obviously the monster died because they cut the connection, because this was always the thing, was like, if we close the rift and we shut its connection with the upside down, then we can sort of, it won't survive out here. And because of Billy's death and because of them doing that at the same time, it all had this knock-on effect where the monster just sort of collapsed and just started turning into sludge and melting everywhere. And then it was intercut. It was like going backwards and forwards really quickly between that and then between what was going on in the gate room. And there's all these sparks and that. And then you just had Hopper looking up at Joyce, and she was sort of looking like knowing, no, what, get out of there. And he just sort of looked like as if to say, there isn't any way. And it was all red and explosions. And then it all blew up and the gate was sealed. Well, kind of. There was still a little bit of a crack, but it was mostly sealed.
It was closing, but it's still a little bit.
And then the smoke all cleared. Yeah, when the smoke all cleared and stuff, there was no sign of Hopper.
No, because Murray came rushing and said, "Where's Jim? Where's Jim?" And she sort of went,
shook her head, didn't she? And yeah, and he was like, "Oh no!" And then
then we saw all these helicopters over the mall, and it was Dr. Owen's gang arrived too late.
Yes, so we get to see, what's his name, Paul. I forget what the actor's called now.
His name came up, doesn't?
Yeah, from not Two and a Half Men. My Two Dads.
Yes.
Obviously, he was in that, and he was also in Aliens and stuff. And we've seen him in this before as this Dr. Owens guy. So it's interesting that we got him shown again of what was going on there in the facility and everything. So yeah, his people turn up to sort of take control of what's happened and mop up the mess, I suppose.
Yeah. But a bit too late, and then Joyce and Murray, the soldiers came charging, and he goes, "Don't worry, we're Americans. We're." It's like, okay, and they got them outside, and they were like, she's looking everywhere, and then they saw the ambulances, and she saw her little Will running over to her, and then we saw Elle, and she's looking, and Joyce also was just crying, and she's like, "No, it means Hopper's not coming back."
Yeah, so it was really sad. So you got like Max lost her brother, Elle lost her father. Joyce lost her potential love interest. The mall probably is going to get torn down now. It's going to take them a long time to clear all that gunk off the floor anyway. And it was all pretty, it was a pretty bleak sort of ending. And then it sort of fades to black. And then we get 3 months later.
3 months later.
And so Joyce...
There's a big TV report about the events, wasn't there?
Yeah, and they're talking about like Russians and talking about strange goings on. It was like one of these, like you see, I don't know what to call them, but they're like a documentary, but it's like about like the truth about government and UFOs exposed, and all those kind of things. It was that. It was like, about strange things going on in this small rural town in America, and in Hawkins, and we're going to get this expose on shady government organizations and this, that, and the other.
And we had it was very interesting. We had the video shop. So we had Robin and Steve going to try and get a job at the video shop. Remember the geeky guy? Yes,
the guy. Yeah.
And basically he said, "You're hired, and you're not."
Yeah, because he was like trying to talk to Steve about like why should I hire you? And he's like, he didn't know anything about films or anything like that. And then he goes off and he disappears. And then she's having the chat with the guy and she goes, "Look, right, we both know what he was like in high school." And he's like, "Yeah, why do you want to be friends with him? He used to bully people like us back in high school." And she's like, "Yeah, but he's different now." And she's like, "Look at him." She's like, saying about the girls and all the girls that would...
You'll get all the girls come into the video shop, and he's like in the thought of that.
She's like saying, "Oh, there'll be too many for him to handle." You know what that means? There'll need to be somebody there to sort of mop up the excess and all of this kind of stuff.
And then he'd been wandering around the shop and he knocked over a cardboard cutout, and wasn't it Baywatch? And he goes, "Oh yes, bath time. I know this one."
It wasn't Baywatch, because it was the 80s. It was like, I don't know what.
But it wasn't
It was somebody like
time, was it?
It was like
she had a swimming costume on.
Yeah, I want to say. I mean, it wasn't like Farrah Fawcett, but it was like somebody like that. It was like one of these like icons from from years back. So no, it was way before Baywatch, Mum.
Yeah,
but
but
it
he
was a woman
seriously
in
didn't
a
know who it
swimming
was, did he?
costume, and he was like, he put his hands in the wrong places, and he was all kind of like awkward with it and stuff. And you're like, oh dear. And Robin's just kind of like, oh, that's Steve, kind of thing.
And then we went to the house. We saw Joyce packing up the lorry to
so
move.
she, obviously made the decision off the back of everything that happened in the end. She obviously decided, I am actually moving. So,
and we had another rendition of Neverending Story, but this time it was Lucas and Max taking the mick out of Dusty.
Oh, and they were going, how does that harmony go again? What was it? What, Dusty Buns? What was the bit? And he's like, he's just looking at them and like shaking his head and just sort of like in disgust. And he
said he'll only sing it to her,
yeah,
didn't he, or something?
And they're like, oh, we'll sing it again. And so then they're sat there singing it. And I'm like, you guys are mean.
And then we had Will giving away his Dungeons and Dragons to the charity box.
Wow, yeah. But that charity box ended up somewhere very interesting, didn't it?
Yeah. And then we had a nice little bit with Jonathan and Nancy, and like saying, "Stay, and I'll hide you in the basement," like
just like we did with Elle, yeah.
And then we also had Elle packing, and that she couldn't get the teddy off the top shelf
because she's got no powers.
To use her powers, and it didn't work. It didn't work.
Her powers
she had no powers at all.
No.
Maybe it's because she's older.
No, I think it's because of what's happened. It's because of what happened to her, but.
So Mike came in and he said, "Oh, they'll come back," and he got the teddy down for her.
Yeah.
And there's a nice little bit, those two, and then I knew, and then she said, "Remember what you said about when you were in the room and you were talking?" And you go, "Oh, I can't remember. What was I saying?" And she turned around and goes, "I love you too."
I know. Aww.
She had a little cheeky grin on her when she walked away, didn't she? And he's just stood there like, "Oh, what just happened there?" And then we had poor Joyce sorting out the stuff, and obviously there was Hopper's stuff there, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And then she found the iconic heart-to-heart letter that he was supposed to be saying to Elle and Mike that night, and she never used.
And she gave it to Elle
to read, didn't she? So I was like, oh.
And then again, that was so sad. I mean, that I had tears in my eyes in that bit. She was like, lay down on the floor, and it was in his voice. And it was him talking about like just wanting the best for you kids and about how
and they showed him, didn't they? Like what he was doing, walking around the room writing it and going, "I've got to write some more to this." And then she was reading it. So,
and like how she was like the best thing to come into his life, and that I know I'm not your actual dad, but I feel like I'm your dad, and I only want the best for you kids, and all this stuff. And it was so nice and sentimental and well thought out. And you go, now I understand why he took so long writing it and why he was so awkward about delivering it, because he's always quite tough, and it was quite a mushy sentimental thing that he came up with. And she's just in floods of tears thinking that's the only person I've had in my life, because of all the stuff that was done to me, the way I was used as an experiment and stuff, is now dead. And it was just really sad. And you're like, oh,
it was really sad.
So then you cut to them obviously finishing up, packing up, and it turns out, okay, so Elle's going with them. So Jonathan, Will, and Elle are all going with Joyce off to parts unknown, and you get all these tearful goodbyes where everybody's hugging each other. Oh, and poor Will. Will was just he was inconsolable, wasn't he? He was like just really, really sad. And it's like, these are his best friends. This is his life. This is all he's ever known. And it was such a heartbreaking moment seeing them all say goodbye to each other like that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, bless.
And we saw Mike and Lucas bring in the box. Erica got the donation box.
So she got all of the Dungeons and Dragons stuff and everything. So
all the geek stuff.
You are now officially a proper geek, just like the rest of us. And she grinned, didn't she? She had this big grin on her face.
Oh.
So
then really basically cool. it showed them driving off, and then the credits came on, and there was sort of like, I mean, really, some people might have missed this ending because they might have went, oh, it's finished now.
Yeah, because we got a post-credit scene, didn't we?
So we had a post-credit scene. We saw a facility in Russia. There were some prisoners, and they were going to get one. And did they say they didn't want the American?
Yeah, he said not. Yeah, because they were saying about getting somebody, and then he said not the American, and you're like, American?
Oh, yeah. And then they take some Russian guy out, didn't they? And they put him in another cell, and then they released
something. So there was a grate went up, and he's like going, please let me out, I'm sorry, and all this stuff. And he's like, please, why are you doing this? and they're just watching, and you hear this noise, and then you see this thing crawling out of this like low tunnel, and then it was a
grey thing, wasn't it?
It was a Demogorgon, wasn't it? It was one of the creatures from like the first series and
that
stuff.
Dustin had.
Yeah.
It's like,
and it just opened
who's the American
face, and it just like the face like came open with all the teeth, and you just heard the scream.
So
and
it's such a like, wow, can't wait for next series.
So let's talk about.
But like you say, people might not have realised that there was an extra bit. So anyone that's watched season 3 and the ending, if you haven't seen this last bit, just go to the end bit near the credits, because you might have missed it, because some people don't. You know, when the credits come and go, that's the end of that.
Yeah.
And then they just turn it off, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
It's like with films, like you and me always sit as long as we can until the last bit of the film finishes, just in case there's an end bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, what were you going to say, Dom?
So yeah, thoughts on this series then is that I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a good story. It was a good progression of the themes as well, because if you look at like where they were in the beginning to where they are now, and we have seen, especially with Elle's character, okay, we've seen a very interesting development from this scared, weird, powerful girl who doesn't trust anybody, doesn't know anybody, doesn't have any connections to anybody. And that built over the course of season 1. Then you get season 2, where it's all about her adjusting to life, being a person, you know, being with these people, and then having all of these awful things rear back up again and having to face it. And then ultimately getting to a point where you go, she saved the day again, but only just.
Yeah.
Then you move into this season where it's like, okay, so they're now all a little bit older again, and they're slightly separated at the moment because they're going through changes. They're experiencing different things in their life. The group is not quite as together as it was before. And through the course of the season, the events of what happens brings them all together again, so that they are then back where they should be. They're a united force. But ultimately, this time, Elle wasn't the one that saved the day.
No.
And now what is she? Because she's just a normal girl now. She has no powers, and she wasn't able to save them. So her purpose, like in that way, in terms of the show's hierarchy, has changed dramatically now. So that's it's an interesting narrative progression when you look. I know that I've seen some things where people have been critical of like, oh, season 2 wasn't exciting enough, or season 3, what was this, that, and the other. I mean, it's generally overall it's been well received from start to finish, but there have been niggly criticisms, and it's like I don't look at it just in isolation of that one season. I look at it as a whole. They are telling a continual story over the course of these seasons. There is a growth, just in the same way the kids are growing up, the story is growing and progressing. And if you look at it from that way, but if you look at it from that way, you can see that there is a narrative progression. Based on that, my speculation is season 4 is going to be about Elle coming back into her own and learning, like, trying to deal with this new status quo. So that'll be part of it. It'll be like, well, what do I do now? How do I fit in? How do I live the life of a normal girl? I've never lived that life before. But then I think gradually it'll be her learning about how to get her powers back. This is something I think is going to tie in. So something that really annoyed me about this season, so like up until this point, and it was only after it finished I started thinking further. But while I was watching the season, I'm like, where are all the others then? Where are the other experiments? Because in season 2, we had that random one-off episode where Elle left town and she met up with another girl that was like her.
With a sister.
Yeah.
There was some sort of like,
And it was like, there are more of us. So then you're then thinking, by the end of season 2, because she struggled to close the doorway and the fact the Mind Flayer is still out there, you go, she's going to need backup in season 3 because she's not strong enough. And all the way through season 3, seeing her lose the fight to Billy, seeing her struggling to fight against the Mind Flayer and stuff, you're going, she's going to need help. She's going to need help. Some point, the cavalry is going to arrive. And it never did. So I was like, why did they do that episode? Because even at the time, the Duffer Brothers that make the show, they went on record and said, that episode is important going forward. It's, it might seem like a random, like, episode out of the whole story, of like Elle's separate little adventure, but it's actually an important episode in terms of the future of the series. So I was fully expecting it to play into this series, but it didn't. So I'm now thinking
it's going to go into the next season.
Yeah, that's going to form the basis of season 4, in that she's either going to reach out to somebody or someone's going to come looking for her. One of the other experiments is going to come looking for her. And then I think that we might get one or more of these other children who are going to help her to learn how to get her powers back.
Yeah.
You know, like, you know, in the way that she used her ability to go into Billy's mind and go into his memories.
Yes.
Maybe somebody will help her do that with her own. They'll be like, you need to go into your own mind. You need to go to a certain point because you've created like a blocker subconsciously, which is stopping
you need to heal yourself, sort of
your
things,
powers.
to heal yourself, yeah.
So I reckon that we might see something like that in season 4. That's just my speculation.
Yeah.
The other thing, obviously, is about the ending. So can we agree? Can we be on the same page here, which I think we will be, in that the American that the Russians discussed is Hopper?
Yes.
Now the question is, how did he get there? Why? How is he in like a gulag in Russia? How is that? You know, how did he go from being in Hawkins in the USA to being in this Russian prison?
Yeah.
Is the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the only plausible answer I can find right now is the fact that the Russians were trying to open their own way into the Upside Down in Russia. So the only thing I can think of is that they worked out how to do it. Maybe by opening the other one in Hawkins, they were able to get the one in Russia open. And that Hopper, realizing that he was going to be disintegrated, had no other choice but to jump into the Upside Down in order to stop himself from dying. So he went in the Upside Down.
And he's come out the other side.
Yeah, because of the way, because it's like a different reality, because it's like, you know, layered on our world. The way it works is probably very different to the way our world works. And that if there was another doorway, if the Russians did manage to open a doorway and he found his way through that world and out the other side, and then he ended up in Russia. Or they sent people in, you know, they were going in on a recon mission and they found him and they brought him back and imprisoned him. One or the other.
Yeah. It's got to be something like that. But we'll have to wait and see. Let's not look into it too much, because it'll probably be a couple of years, won't it, that one? Because they don't do it every year, do they?
No, it has been every year so far, hasn't it?
Has it? I thought it was longer.
There might have been a gap between season 1 and season 2, but I'm sure season 2 was last year. I'm sure it was.
I can't remember.
And then
anyway, we'll have to wait and see.
But that's my thoughts anyway.
It definitely is Hopper. He's definitely not dead in my eyes. You know, and then obviously their storyline with her getting her powers back and finding him is going to be the main sort of thing, isn't it? So he's a great character. They couldn't just kill him off like that.
But it's also what other threats are they going to have to deal with? Because, you know, obviously we've seen again, if you talk about progression, we've had in the first season was just like the Demogorgons and stuff and these weird things. Then in season 2, you have the whole thing with Dustin's pet, which turns out to be a monster. And then you also have the emergence of the Mind Flayer as this big bad. And then this season you have the Mind Flayer again, but it's the Mind Flayer finding its way into our world and trying to take over.
And using humans.
Yeah, so now it's like, what's next? What do they face off against in this next season?
It's exciting.
So it's going to be very interesting to see where it all goes. But overall, what would your overall look at the whole series?
I loved it because obviously I'd watched it all and then I didn't watch it all. Obviously watched it all, didn't write about it. Then I had to watch it all episode by episode each week, and I still, every time I watched the episodes, they're just as good as when I first watched them. Yeah. And I didn't remember everything. But it was exciting. It was funny. I like the new characters they brought in, Erica and Robin, and obviously a bit more of Murray because we didn't see much of him in the season 2, I think it was. I like the new guy that unfortunately killed him. But yeah, all in all, I think it's pretty cool. So I liked it. Very good. Cool.
Well, there we go. We're in agreement. It was very good. So let us know what you guys think, what your take on this season was, and if you enjoyed it and stuff like that. And like we said, if you miss that post-credit scene, then go and watch it, because it will just give you that little bit of a teaser of, what they're setting up for season 4. I also want to know how the heroes are going to come back to town as well, because, obviously we've got half the cast have obviously left for pastures new. So it's like, what's going to bring them back? What's going to be
something's going to happen, isn't it?
The trigger that's going to have them return to Hawkins.
Aye.
Well, so there we go. So that was the finale of Stranger Things. And now we're moving on to the 7th episode of season 4 of Preacher. And this episode was titled Messiahs, with an S on the end. So multiple Messiah. So yes, we began where we left off, basically.
Yeah, because obviously at the end of the last one, he fell out the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw some of the people digging a grave.
So you go, okay, so he's clearly dead then.
And the saint was watching them.
Yeah.
And then we saw Jessie and a little girl by the like a lake fishing.
And he was like giving her instructions and telling her what she should be doing and stuff like that. And you're like, okay, this is all a bit strange. And then we saw a returning character that we haven't seen for a while.
Yes.
Which was
I can't remember his name.
Fiore.
Yeah.
Who's one of the angels. And
he was standing there, and Jessie was thinking, "Oh, I'm in heaven then."
Yep.
And he said something about the endless wall.
Mm-hmm.
You remember more about what he said?
Well, yeah, he's talking to him about the plate, and he's like, "This is heaven." He's like, "Yeah, this is heaven." And he's like, "Wow, it's beautiful," because it was a really lovely looking place, with like forests and waterfalls and really beautiful scenery. And he's like, "Oh, you should have seen it before. It was much better like years ago." And he's like, "But now, with this, with the war with hell and all of this, like you said, things have changed a bit around here. It's not as good as it used to be, and all of this kind of stuff." And he's sort of walking and talking, leading Jessie somewhere. And eventually they ended up at like this building, and there was a big golden door, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And he opens the door up, and it's like a strange, like, I don't know how to describe it. It's just like a chamber, like a long room. And he brings Jessie into this room, and there was a load of soldier angels, yeah. And they're all stood there, and they're basically like, they're all there to pledge allegiance to him. And you're like,
they want him to be God.
Yep, because they parted, and at the end was the throne, obviously the throne of heaven. And they were like, Fiore says to him, "Well, now you're here." He's like, "We've got a job for you, got a proposition. We want you to take God's place and sit on the throne."
And he didn't want to sit on it, did he? Because he said it's a sin.
Yeah, because he did think about it, didn't he? He did, like,
Yeah, they showed it, didn't they? Didn't they show it him?
He put his hand on it, didn't he?
And he sort of saw a vision
of himself as God, and he was like glowing eyes, and he's like, "I am the Alpha, the Omega."
Yeah, that's it.
And it showed all these weird things of like, obviously him creating life, and various other images were flashing up. And then he sort of pulled his hand away, and he like came to and went, "No, I won't do it." And he's like, "It's a sin." Because what's funny about all of this is that with everything that's happened, and with him being in opposition to God, and all the stuff that's been going on, he's still got that faith of like, there is no God but God, so I can't take God's place because that's a sin. And then he's like to all the angels, "You're all traitors." Like, and they all drew their swords, and they were like, "Rah," sort of thing. And then Fiore's like, "Okay, all right, let's calm down. Don't worry, everybody. It's going to be fine. There's no need for any of this," sort of thing. So it was like, oh dear. But then that kind of, we left there, didn't we? We only got that bit, and then we left there.
We got that little bit, and then we went back to see Tulip and Kaz. We were back on the road, and they stopped the car, so she decided to read the letter.
Yeah, and we still never knew found out what was in it.
No.
But whatever it was.
Saw her looking really sad.
Yeah, it made her cry, didn't it?
And they stopped. She saw a church or something. She wandered off, and then Kaz saw a random house.
With a sign about
chickens outside.
Yeah, there was a sign, and the sign said about fresh eggs and something about chickens. And so he sat there for a minute, and then he got out of the car himself. And you're like, right, okay. So my thought process was, he's going to get a chicken, like straight off the bat. I thought that's why he's because he looked at his arm. He looked at his arm that was all burnt up, and then you're like,
so
well,
he needs to heal, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's a vampire. He needs to feed in order to be able to heal. So you're like, oh, he's going to go and eat chickens.
And she went to the church and she was looking around and getting really annoyed. And then she saw the picture of Jesus and God.
Mm-hmm.
And she burnt the picture. And then she burnt the church down, didn't she?
Yeah, because she wrecked the church, sat down, had a cigarette, and she was like going, hello, anybody there? Hello? You got to speak to me? And then she's like, God damn it. And then she looked at the picture and she kept looking at the picture and looking at the picture. And it was clearly something, an idea was forming in her head. And then, yeah, like you said, she set fire to the letter and then left it. And then you see like after she came back and got in the car and you got to see the church was ablaze. But before we saw that, it cut to the house. And there's this old fella.
Cassidy got in the house.
Yeah, there's this old bloke, and he gets a knock on the door, and he answers the door, and it's Cassidy, and he invites him in. Then Cassidy's looking really creepy and shifty, and the guy's like, "Oh, what happened to you, mate?" And he's like, "Oh, I run out of petrol." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, I know what that feels like." And he's like, come through." And then he takes him in, and he offers him some lemon squash.
Lemonade.
Just made some lemon squash. Would you like some? Are you thirsty? And he's like, I'm thirsty, all right. And you're like, oh no, this poor guy is going to die. He's going to eat him, because he went to the fridge and the next thing Cassidy stood right behind him. And he's like, you're a bit close there, friend, and all this lot. And then Cassidy starts wiping his shoes on this towel. And he's like, oh, if you wouldn't, that's the missus. And he's like, oh, where is the missus? And he's like, oh, she's with the Lord. And he's like, oh, with the Lord, is she? Oh, that's nice for her, and all this lot. And you're like, this is going to be horrible. He's going to like slaughter this.
This is going to end badly, yeah.
And then he's like, what do you actually want? And then he's like, I've come to eat your chickens.
So when she got back in the car, he had all blood and everything around his mouth, didn't he?
I love the fact she just looked at him and didn't say a word. And then as they drove off, you saw the church was just like a flame. And it was just like burning down. And you're like, oh, okay.
We then had a couple of snippets. We had that Featherstone woman making the coffee for the conference.
Yeah.
So we had also Star still being attacked by the dingo.
Oh, wasn't that funny? The fact that he was chasing it and it had clearly had his bits in its mouth, but they blurred it. It was all like blurred, so you couldn't actually see it, but you could see that there was something in this dingo's mouth. Oh, that was so funny.
Where the blood was on his clothing, yes, we could tell what it was.
Yeah, and he was like chasing it and going, come back, please, stop, and all this. Like, oh, that was so. But then he collapsed and he rolled over, and then you saw the shadows of some people approaching him.
Just like, ooh.
It's like, what's that all about?
And then we had Good Morning America, the chat show, talking about the Australians and the New Zealand carry-on.
Yeah, because you had them all like being really cheesy, typical like breakfast TV hosts. And the guy that was like the other news reporter, he's just like, look, can we just cut the shit here and start talking about what's really going on? And he's like, about the powers going to war with each other and about the nuclear explosion in Australia. And the woman's like, oh, you're referring to the brewing conflict between Australia and New Zealand and about how all the other world powers are getting involved. And he's like, this, that, and the other. And then the other guy's like, maybe we should cut to commercial because we've got children watching and all this lot. And the guys, did you notice any of the stuff that was going along the bottom, by the way? Any of the banner stuff?
Yeah, it was saying about all the stuff, isn't it, that's happened.
And there was a little reference back to the very, very first episode, because if you remember in the very beginning, when we first saw Genesis trying to find a host, the first person he went into was Tom Cruise, and it killed Tom Cruise.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a whole bit there to say, like, Tom Cruise funeral arrangements still stalling over something or other. And I was like, that was just a funny little throwback to the fact that, you know, Tom Cruise was killed at the very beginning of all this, and now they're still talking about the funeral arrangements still haven't been sorted properly because of complications. So that was a funny little thing. And then, there was all the stuff about how Australian forces had occupied Wellington and they were threatening that there would be public hangings if there was any kind of unrest. I'm trying to remember if there was anything else there that was worth noting. There was random stuff in there too, but there was
quite
just
a lot of stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I was just like, interesting little tidbits of stuff there.
Yeah. And then we had Julep and Cassidy went to a place called Williamsburg.
Yes.
And so there was a woman they met.
They went to see Danny, and we've seen her before, haven't we? Like way back. She was in
long time ago.
Either the first or the second season, and she's this Jewish woman, and they go there because they want her help for something, and they're like, you know what we need to know, and she's like, I can't do that, and she's like, if you want my help, you've got to do something in exchange. And Tulips looked at her, and she was like, it's the only thing. She's like, you know what I want. And Tulip's like, you know what I want. And she's like, well, if you want what you want, then you've got to give me what I want, kind of thing. And I love the fact that Cassidy's just kind of doesn't really know what was going on in this whole exchange, just like we at home are sat there going, don't really know what's going on here.
And then we see them in a diner, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were in a diner, and then what happened there? Something kicked off, and she shot some...
No, nothing kicked off. They were having a random conversation, and she was saying about not knowing what to do, and that this is something that Danny's wanted her to do for a long time. And he's like, look, I can help you. If you want me to do it, I'll do it. I don't mind. And she's like, no. And he's like, well, I don't mind though. And then he's talking about how good the food is and about being back in this neighborhood. And he's like, I should go down to, I can't remember where he said, it was like a pub clearly. And he's like, I'd go and see the boys. And then he went, oh, sure, they won't be boys anymore, though. It's like, they were 20 there. What'd they be? He said, oh, geez, they'd be dead. It was just so funny how he's just rambling on all this, really pointless waffle. And she's just sort of sat there brooding. And then the woman comes over,
she just got up,
gives them the bill. And then they sit there for a minute. And then, literally, she stood up, swiveled round. There was a guy sat behind them. She shot him in the head. Everybody screamed. She walked out. And then Cassidy just sort of wiped his mouth with a napkin, got up, put some money on the table. And I love the way he just walked out, and you could see him, because you could see the owners in the mirror on the wall on the opposite side of Cassidy. And they're just sort of looking shocked. And he just looked over and just sort of smiled and nodded his head as if to say thank you, and walked out as if nothing had happened.
No, it's like, see you later.
It's that was really bizarre. So it's like, who's this?
Really random.
Why did she shoot this guy? What was that all about?
Yeah. So before we got back to find out what that was, we had Humperdoo and Jesus seeing his son.
Yeah, and he gave him a hug, and then he got a bit.
And then he got an erection.
Yeah. He was like, oh no, that's not cool. And then Hitler was stood there finding this all very amusing. And then he's like,
started playing the piano.
Yeah, and then he started dancing, kind of. And then he's like, I don't understand. I thought my child was supposed to be an exceptional dancer. And then Hitler's like, yes, you're correct. And then he got a gun out and he shot Humperdoo.
Shot him.
And then I love the fact that Jesus went, Jesus Christ! What are you doing? You just killed the Messiah. And he's like, that wasn't the Messiah. And he's like, that was a clone. And he's like, the fact is that there are lots of them. And the real Messiah is somewhere. He's like, he is out there in the world. Jesse Custer, let him loose. And he's like, he may not even be alive anymore. He might have walked into traffic, or he might have done this, or he might have done that. And he's like, but the fact of the matter is, we shouldn't be worrying about that when we have a perfect replacement. And Jesus is like, what are you talking about? And he's like, there's somebody else perfect that could be the Messiah. And he looks at Jesus and he's like, you, my Lord, you should be the Messiah that we need. And you're like, oh.
Well, they started having a row, didn't they? Started having a row and walked out the meeting. Else they did that. Hopper 2 was out there, and then he had the coffee, didn't he, that he'd got from Featherstone.
Yeah, so he gave Jesus his latte.
And
Jesus was like, bless you, my child. And he stormed off. And then Hitler's looking at him, and then he's like, sugar! And he's like,
but yeah, I'm wondering if she put something in the drink. Because she prepared it, didn't she? And sort of looked a bit,
yeah, so
in their coffee.
It did make me laugh, though. I'll tell you something. The guy that plays Hitler in this, his characterization is so funny sometimes. Yeah. It was the way he took the coffee, turned tail, walked into the room, and then with one hand and his other leg, he closed the doors, but he did it in such a kind of comical sort of fashion. It was so funny, just the way that he did it. And then you got the guy stood there looking what am I doing next sort of thing. Do you want to stick with that bit for a second?
Yes.
Okay, so then we get to see him again, and he sat in an office oh no, we didn't. We got a cut to a police station. There's a detective, and a police officer comes in and says about a phone call and all of this lot, and he's like, oh, God damn it, and all that, and he takes it. And the phone call turns out to be to this Hoover 2, and it turns out Hoover 2 is actually an undercover police officer.
Yes.
Who's infiltrated the Grail to try and take them down. And so he's telling this other guy what he's found, and he's on about Hitler and Jesus and all of these other things and what they're planning to do and the whole World War III thing and all of this lot. And the guy's like, you're doing a damn fine job, son, and all this stuff. He's like, you'll make detective soon. He's like, I'm not trying to do it to make detective, sir. I'm just trying to do my job and be a good cop and all this lot. And before he gets the chance to finish saying anything else, he gets shot in the head.
By Featherstone.
And and then we got the actual proper reveal, which is, obviously I had said it was Featherstone the other week. And she takes off the wig, takes off the beard, and then she sits down in the All-Father's chair, and she sits at the desk and she looks in front of her, and it's the Apocalypse, the Plan 2020. And then she just sort of sits there, and then you're like, oh, very interesting. Is she now taking control of the Grail?
Yeah.
Is that her plan here to take control of everything?
Who knows?
So there we are.
So we then went back to Tulip and Cassidy, who'd gone back to see that woman.
Yeah.
And apparently it was her husband they'd killed. And it's like, but she was on about, she has somebody in safekeeping that Jesse's given her for safekeeping. And it's like, oh, okay, that's what they want. And she said, no, you can't have them. You can't have what's there. So then she took them to a synagogue, didn't she?
Yeah, because Tulip jumped over the desk really quickly and punched her in the face twice.
Yeah.
And then she's like, you are going to give us what you want, kind of.
So the car where the woman had tissues up her nose where she punched her in the nose.
And then she asked her in the car about
synagogue.
Jesse, because she said about, where is Jesse anyway? And then it's like, and Tulip looked down and Cassidy was like, he's dead. And they're like, oh, okay. So she then pulled up, as you say, at a synagogue, and they go in, and you've got all the Jewish people there worshipping, and they're in the middle of a service, and they walk straight through everybody, and they go through the other side and down a hallway, and then there's a big decorated door, and she warns them, and she says, look, you shouldn't be doing that. When you go in, you're going to regret this because you're not going to be prepared for it. And she's like, you don't know what you're letting yourselves in for. And they're like, just open the goddamn door. And so she opens the door and they go in, and we see somebody eating paste, eating glue. And it was Humperdoo.
Yeah, the real Humperdoo.
The real Humperdoo sat there with this rabbi, and he's playing with kids, basically paint and glue and things like that. And he's licking glue off a stick and all of this kind of stuff. And then they look and they're like, what is this? And she's like, you don't understand. She's like, I had the same look on my face when I first saw him, when Jesse first brought him to me. But then I realized, and she's like, about how special he is and how his power is going to change the world, that he's the Messiah that we've been waiting for. And she's like, goes over to this little keyboard and turns it on. And she starts playing a little ditty, and he gets up and he starts tap dancing, and then he picks up a cane and he's doing all this dancing, and they're just looking Cassidy's got his mouth open of what am I looking at? And he's just doing this dance and stuff, and then she stops playing, and he stops and he starts rubbing his crotch with this stick. Yes. It's like, oh dear, okay, he's gone back to being strange, inbred weirdo again. The next thing, they're taking him out of there.
Yeah, and all the rabbis were protesting, weren't they? So it's trying to stop them.
Yeah, because she shouted, didn't she? She's like, they're trying to escape with our Messiah. And so they all surround them, and they're cutting them off, and they get separated from
pulling him away. Yeah, he was going back, so they couldn't get him. And then he stopped them all, didn't he? He said, no.
Well, he started, I don't know what he was doing. He was because when he talks, apart from when he says Humperdoo, you can't really understand what he's saying.
What he's saying.
But he was going, and they all started bowing down, and they were all down on their knees, and he's stood up on this platform going, and they were all worshipping him, and I was like, what is happening here? And Tulip and Cassidy have got the same look on their face of I don't really understand what's happening. And then he gets down and he walks towards them, and then he reaches his hand out to Tulips.
Yeah.
To say, I'll go with you kind of thing. So it's oh, he wants to go with them. That's interesting. And she's like, what are you going to do with him? What are you doing? He's our Messiah. And then she walks out the door, and Cassidy stops. And then he tells this weird little story about somebody I can't remember what her name was now, somebody Cullen or something, and she was like, she had all these sons. Betsy Cullen, that's right. And she had all these sons, and they all went off to fight in the war, and they all got killed. And Betsy was like a devout Catholic, and she had all this belief and everything. And then all her sons died, and then there was Bobby was left, and then he died, and she was left with nothing. And what was her reward for keeping the faith and believing in God? And after all the loss and hardship she'd suffered in her life, nothing. There was nothing. Yeah. And he's like, and that's, he said at the end of the day, he said, we're taking your Messiah and we're going to kill him in front of God. And then we're going to kill God.
Yeah.
And then he walked out and she's like, what? And then there's this little Jewish guy looks up and goes, I didn't know we had a Messiah. And she's like, because nobody told you, Eli. Like that. It's like, okay, that was weird. That was a weird little way.
They got in the car, drove away, and Humperdoo was hanging out the car like a kid would go, ooh, this is great.
Or like a dog would do.
Oh, dog. It's hilarious. So then weird. We had a bit with that Jesse and the angel, because obviously with the thing when he said, I don't want to sit on it, he told him that God had killed him because he wanted him to be God, didn't he?
Yeah, because he said, what if it's all part of God's plan?
And that God, he realised he wasn't in heaven. He was like somewhere like purgatory, wasn't he? Really?
Well, yeah, because
everything changed. It went from being all like.
He said, I can't believe I'm dead, but I still really want a cigarette. And then Fiore pulled out a pack of cigarettes from inside of his robe and handed them to Jesse. And Jesse looked at him and he went, well, when you've had a grand a day speedball habit, you've got to take the edge off somehow. And he's like, I know those things are disgusting, but and then he went, by the way, how is Cassidy? And then he's like, he's still alive. And he's like, yeah, he's good at doing that. Because obviously them two had that little weird relationship in Vegas.
Oh, yeah, the relationship, didn't they? Yeah. When they were getting drugged up.
And now he's obviously he's a recovering addict now. So he's taken up smoking to try and take the edge off his drug cravings. And then Jesse starts going, I still don't understand this, because he's like, all the things I've done, how did I end up in heaven? And he's like, all the things, and he's like talking about all the people he's killed and various, and Fiore's basically trying to counter everything he says. And then he's like about his two friends, and the reason he left them was because he couldn't stay with them, because otherwise he would have ended up killing them. And then Fiore's like, but you forgave them, didn't you? And then he's like, that's just the thing. I haven't forgiven them. And then he stands up and goes, this isn't heaven. And then you get the cut. And then basically, where he if you remember, he was in hell, because they're those weird cells that they use. And they have the strange light thing that goes on the ceiling that puts them into almost like a trance, I suppose.
Yeah, like where Eugene was.
Yeah, like Eugene was and where Hitler was and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it turns out he's locked up in one of these cells in hell. So then he tries using the voice, but it doesn't work. Nobody comes. And he's like, let me out. And you see all this vibration as it goes up the hallway as he's using the voice. But it didn't do anything. Nobody came to let him out.
No.
So then we go from there.
Didn't the angel come back to him again?
Well, yeah, in a minute. We left that bit when we got the reveal that he was in hell.
Yeah.
After another section we've already previously discussed, they go back to him there, and he's once again been put under, and he shouts, come on, really, again, and stuff. And then he goes in again, and he's back in heaven. And then he's talking to Fiore again. Fiore's like, yeah, you're right. This isn't heaven. This is just a projection. I'm just a projection. None of this is real. And he's like, but the offer is real. He's like, the offer to take God's place is real. And he's like, I can't do that. And he's like, let me show you something. So then he shows him a memory. And then this was really interesting, because this memory was back before the events of the very first episode kicked off. And you have God sat there listening to prayers, and he's like going, no, next one. And there's all these people asking for various things, and he's like dismissing them all, looking really bored and really, like, oh dear, no, next. And then Fiore comes in, and he's dressed in a suit and stuff. And he's like, my lord, I'm so sorry. And he's like, but I've got some terrible news. And he's like, what is it, my child? And he's like, Genesis has escaped. And then God's like, whoa, sits forward. And he's like, I'm really, really sorry. And he's like, me and I can't remember what the other angel's called, but he's like, we'll go and sort it out. Don't worry. He's like, you left us in charge. We'll go and get him back. We'll go down to earth and we'll sort this out. And he's like, leave me, my child. I need to think on this. He's like, thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Yeah, it's funny.
So he walks out of the room, and then you see God for a second in the chair, and the next thing, boom, bang,
Whoosh!
straight up through the ceiling into the universe. Because that was the other cool thing in that room, is the ceiling is actually the whole of creation. So it's the whole of, and it's moving. It's not just a picture. It's all moving. So it's clearly supposed to be, that's the actual universe. And God shoots up through it, smashes through it, and then he's gone. And it's like, so that was the day
we saw him,
that God,
he went on his mission.
Yeah, God abandoned heaven. And then you get to see a little bit of him out in the world. And I don't know about you, but what I got from this, I then was like, I know what's happened then. Basically, God has had some kind of mental breakdown. And he's almost like having a midlife crisis. And that's why he's abandoned everything. Just kind of like, well, you know.
And he met up with some hooker, didn't he? But everybody kept recognising him as God.
Yeah.
And he was getting annoyed with it. So he went to that shop and he saw the dog suit.
Yeah.
So the dog suit was so no one else could recognise him. So he could go about whatever he wanted to do without anyone like realising who he was. So that's where the dog suit came in.
Yeah, travelling the world on his motorbike, you know, with various...
So basically we saw all the stuff that we've seen him do previously, didn't we? All his adventures and stuff. And then what's this creation part 3?
Yeah, because then it cut back to obviously them after that, and he's like, the dog suit's creepy, and he's like, yeah, I know, I find it pretty disgusting myself. And then he's like, and he's like, so what is this all about? And then he's like, God's got a plan. And he's like, basically, God created the dinosaurs, then God created mankind. Now he's got a new plan, creation part 3. He's basically going to wipe all of you out, and he's going to start again with a new project. That's when we then got to see, when he was saying that, we got to see the trailer, didn't we? And we got to see God, and he had some kind of weird multicolored wing. It looked like the wing of something. And he had like glue, and he had a blowtorch, and he had blood all over him, and he's like clearly making something. So then you go, all of the weird animal noises and all of the strange things that we've heard coming from cages that are covered up in that trailer are clearly part of whatever it is that he's trying to create. And then it cuts back to them, and then he goes, and that's why we need you to sit on the throne. Basically, if you want to stop this,
he's going to replace us all unless you sit on the throne, basically, isn't it? Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so that's where all of this is leading. That's very, very interesting.
It was clever the way they pieced all the bits together, though.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's like, now we know why he did it, why he went on, why he covered himself in the dog suit and all that. So, like, it wasn't some sort of fetish or something. It was just literally, no one could recognise him because he was sick of people seeing him in the street, going, asking him, like, answer their prayers again, wasn't it? It was like, I don't want this.
Exactly.
So he doesn't think he's good enough anymore, but he thinks Jesse is. He thinks, I've done a bad job twice. Unless he does it, I'll probably mess it up again. And I'd rather him take over than me mess it up again, basically, isn't it?
So now we're in this position where we've got Jesse in this situation where, do I take the throne of heaven? Do I go against everything I've ever believed in order to try and save humanity and stop God?
Yeah.
You've got God planning for what's next after the apocalypse. You've got Tulip and Cassidy on the road with Humperdoo with the plan to go to confront God and kill Humperdoo before they kill God themselves. The Saint of Killers is still out there wanting to kill God.
Got to kill God.
And you've got a star somewhere in the outback who's now been found by who knows who.
Somebody. And we've got Featherstone
taking control of the Grail. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, ooh.
Interesting, the position that all the pieces are being moved into.
Yeah, like a chessboard.
And we have 3 episodes left.
Oh, my days.
So I can't wait. I can't wait to see what happens in the next episode.
It's so clever.
Yeah, so good.
It's so clever. It's really good.
And it's the way that they're paying things off. They're going back to little plot threads and things from earlier, and even right back to the first episode in the first season and stuff. And they're tying everything back together and looping all the story in. And
so it all makes sense. Yeah.
It's really good.
Loved it.
So there we go.
Yeah, next week.
So what an exciting week it was. And
are you going to let the viewers know about our special treat next week?
No.
No?
We're going to keep them in suspense. So there you go. You've teased.
Give in suspenders till next week.
You've teased that there's something, but no, we're not going to tell them. You'll have to join us and tune in for the next episode to find out what that thing is.
Special treat was.
But one thing I can tell you is that next week's episode, replacing Stranger Things, will be the return of American Horror Story. So hopefully that's going to be good.
Yes. Again, another 80s themed thing. So.
Yeah. So let's see if they can nail it in the way that Stranger Things has.
Yeah.
Well, there we go, Mother. Thank you once again for joining me for another great, entertaining conversation this week.
Very welcome. Thank you to all our listeners for the lovely comments for me.
Yeah, that's right.
Keep them coming. Keep them coming.
Keep inflating her ego. I'm going to do a God soon. I'm just going to abandon my channel and leave you to run it.
Don't worry, I won't come looking for you.
I'm going to go out and get my own dog suit and my own Harley Davidson. Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Well, as I said at the top of the show, folks, if you have enjoyed today's show, please hit that thumbs up button and leave us a like. Let us know that you're enjoying what we do here, and leave us comments so that we can engage with you, because we really enjoy that. So we'll look forward to comments about the things we've discussed, about any questions you might have, whether they be for us or any questions about the stuff we're talking about. And also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, then please do so. Help grow this Geek-Dom into bigger and bigger and better things. That would be hugely appreciated. Check out the description box for the link to my Twitter, so you can come and follow me on there. And also the donation medium, so that you can help out with the future of the podcast, with the future of the channel, towards equipment and various other bits and pieces. That would be hugely, hugely appreciated. And that will do us.
Yes.
We will catch you guys again next week. So you all take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye, 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 bye.